Chapter 595. Within a short period of time, innumerable undead creatures had appeared outside the south border city. Little Skull's strength had obviously skyrocketed after he became a god. Unknowingly, he had become extremely adept at manipulating the element of death. This might have been due to some sort of inspiration from the gravestone on his chest. Enormous undead creatures came from the netherworld one after another. Under Little Skull's command, they lined up neatly and charged at the orc army. In an instant, the area outside the south border city had turned into a kingdom of the undead. Under the influence of Little Skull's domain of divinity, the extremely dense element of death frantically converged and provided the enormous number of undead creatures with an endless supply of energy. The soldiers and civilians watching from the top of the south border city walls were all dumbfounded. They knew that Han Shuo was a powerful necromancer, but they were still astonished when they saw such a terrifying army of undead creatures appear with their own eyes. At a glance, there were densely packed undead creatures everywhere. They seemed to have blotted out the sky and earth. When they ferociously charged at the orc army, their indomitable momentum was extremely frightening. Unbelievable. How could Lord Brian be so terrifying? Heavens, so many undead creatures. So it turns out that necromancy magic can be so valiant when cultivated to a high realm. We're saved. Haha, those damned orcs, they're going to suffer. What's going on? How could he be so powerful? Firenze was obviously taken aback and asked Fanny, who was beside him, in a somewhat hurried manner. I'm not too sure either. I didn't expect his realm to be so terrifying. As a fellow practitioner of necromancy magic, Fanny naturally understood that the appearance of every undead creature would deplete the summoner's mental strength. There were thousands upon thousands of undead creatures outside South Border City. Fanny simply didn't dare to imagine how enormous the mental strength required to summon them would be. Lass, why did this kid suddenly appear? Do you know where he has been for the past 5 years? Firenze was obviously very curious about Han Shuo's disappearance. Seeing that Han Shuo's strength had once again improved at an inconceivable rate, Firenze was truly astounded. I'm not too sure either. It's just that as soon as he returned, he came to help the southern border. Han Shuo's experiences in the Abyss realm were too unimaginable. Without reaching a certain realm of strength, most people would not believe him. Therefore, Fanny did not explain it to her father. Brat, at least you still have some conscience. Firenze coldly snorted when he heard Fanny defending Han Shuo. However, his tone was clearly much more relaxed. Look, they've started fighting. A joyful cry suddenly sounded from the top of the city wall of the south border city. Everyone turned to look and discovered that the undead creatures that covered the mountains and plains had officially begun their attack on the orcs. Gargoyles covered the sky like dark clouds. A few bone dragons moved without wings, bringing with them a large amount of death element. Below them was the Skeleton King and the Zombie King. They were led by a large number of old fey demons, bone devils, mummies, evil knights, hate demons, and zombies. The undead creatures that covered the mountains and plains were still emerging in a steady stream, along with streaks of lightning bolts in the sky. The massive invasion of the undead creatures immediately caused the orc army to be in a state of chaos. After a long and loud horn call, all the orcs were roused. The orcs at the front were already engaged in battle with the undead creatures that were charging towards them. However, the orcs at the back were still clueless as to what was going on. Each and every one of them picked up their weapons in a daze and asked the people beside them what was going on. When a few powerful orc shamans saw the gargoyles surging towards them, they hastily flew into the sky. Riding on their strange, contracted beasts, they chanted mysterious characters in the ancient orc language, forming all kinds of boundaries around them. It was at this moment that Han Shuo, who did not take any further action after summoning Little Skull from the netherworld, suddenly made his move. He transformed into a huge bloody radiance and shot towards the orc army. Midway, Han Shuo's avatar reverted to its original appearance. A long sword glistening with bloody radiance floated in the bloody waves. A destructive energy shrouded the entire battlefield in a split second. At this moment, whether it was the orc army or the city walls of the south border city, Everyone could feel the destructive energy. Under the awe of this enormous destructive energy, everyone's gazes were focused on the long sword emitting a sinister aura. "It's Brian!" Fanny cried out in surprise. A sense of pride involuntarily welled up in her heart when she sensed the boundless destructive energy spreading from the sword. "Oh my God, what a terrifying aura!" Firenze finally could not suppress the shock in his heart and exclaimed softly. The undead creatures were still charging tirelessly at the Orc Empire. The battle at South Border City had fully unfolded. However, on the city walls of the South Border City, the soldiers and civilians who had always been on the defensive had all quieted down. They held their breaths and concentrated their attention on the longsword floating in the bloody waves outside the South Border City. No one knew where Han Shua was, but everyone knew that the longsword that was constantly emitting destructive energy was being controlled by Han Shua. With the longsword as the center, destructive energy suddenly erupted like a mountain torrent. Streaks of energy invisible to the naked eye shot out from the demon's lair edge and blasted towards the orcs in all directions. Miserable wails and howls came out of those orcs' mouths. When the crowd focused their attention, they suddenly discovered that the Orc Empire within 300 meters of the longsword seemed to have been baptized by Doomsday. Amidst the agonizing howls, the orcs were all torn apart and turned into a bloody mist that dissipated into the air. Not a single one of the thousands of orc warriors in that area was intact. On the city walls of the South Border City, everyone was concentrating their attention on the longsword. Not a single one of them knew what had just happened. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, hundreds and thousands of orc warriors had suddenly turned into bloody mist before their eyes. Not even their bones were left behind. The South Border City had been filled with clamorous exclamations and discussions. It was so eerily silent that even a pin drop could be heard. All the soldiers and civilians who saw that scene were shocked by that frightening lethality. In an instant, thousands of savage and powerful beastman warriors were so easily and simply crushed into a bloody mist. Such a frightening scene was too horrifying. Fanny's bright eyes sparkled. Although she felt that the scene was rather cruel, as Han Shua's woman, her vanity far outweighed her sympathy for the orcs when she saw her man's invincible might. Moreover, seeing that the South Border City was sparsely populated, she did not feel that the orcs were worthy of sympathy. Firenze's mouth was agape. His face was lifeless and his eyes were vacant. Coupled with his dirty and torn clothes, he looked no different from an idiot. Most of the people on the city walls had the same expression as Firenze. Some of them were even more shocked than Firenze. They stood there as though they had turned into stone statues. They were just ordinary soldiers and civilians who had not seen much of a spectacle. Moreover, Han Shua's attack was too exaggerated. The impact of that scene on them was too great. They simply could not react for a while. The demon's lair edge did not calm down after unleashing that attack. Instead, it rapidly absorbed the energy of death that had just perished from the bloody mist. The battle between the undead creatures and the orc army was still going on. The cruel and bloody battle was in full swing. After a long while, the South Border City, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly burst into extremely high-pitched cheers. A cry of surprise rang out, jolting everyone back to their senses from their dazed state. An even louder and more enthusiastic clamor came from the mouths of those who were excited. That unforgettable scene was still repeatedly replaying in their minds. They scrambled to discuss it and cheered loudly. Their enthusiasm was unprecedentedly high. Firenze shook his head and forced a smile. His face was filled with an odd expression. He sighed to the jubilant Fanny beside him. "Is this kid even human? I haven't seen him for 5 years. How did he become so terrifying? How would he dare to charge into an orc army of more than 100,000 by himself if he didn't possess the strength to stand above all living beings?" Fanny raised her head proudly and cheered, as though she was the one who unleashed that attack. As Han Shua's woman, she appeared to be even more excited and proud than Han Shua when she saw Han Shua's display of might. The battle continued. After the demon's lair edge absorbed the negative energy, it suddenly transformed into a long rainbow and shot towards the few orc shamans flying in the sky. As the blood-red light flashed past, the few orc shamans turned into a shower of blood that rained down on the orc warriors below. Little Skull rode on the bone dragon and soared above the battlefield. Wherever he passed, the energy of death would suddenly erupt. Large swathes of orc warriors died at the hands of Little Skull. During this process, Little Skull was still unceasingly summoning undead creatures. Tens of thousands of undead creatures from the netherworld stepped through the air and densely occupied every corner of the battlefield, bringing more and more pressure to the orc warriors. These undead creatures were unafraid of death. Under Little Skull's command, they fearlessly charged towards the orc army in an unending stream. Death was happening at every moment. Chapter 596. The gargoyles in the sky pressed down like a dark cloud. The undead creatures that covered the mountains and plains swarmed forward like a swarm of locusts. Little Skull, riding on the bone dragon, skillfully released a large area of effect necromancy magic that enveloped the orc warriors. When a god-grade existence descended to the mortal world, he was practically invincible if he didn't have an expert of the same level to contend with him. Although Little Skull was only a low god, necromancy magic was originally suitable for group battles. The enormous undead creatures tore through the air and actually drowned the orc warriors. Han Shuo transformed into a long sword that dragged along a long sword light. He slithered across the battlefield like a soaring dragon, crushing the orc warriors wherever he passed. Not a single one of them was left unscathed. This was not a battle of equal strength at all. With Han Shuo and Little Skeleton, two low gods on their side, the orc warriors who had been throwing their weight around for the past few years had completely become the target of slaughter. They had absolutely no ability to resist. Amidst the clamor, the orc warriors dispatched a few shamans. Faced with Han Shuo and Little Skull, who were much stronger than them, they were easily killed on the spot. This dealt a heavy psychological blow to the orc warriors. On the battlefield, the cruel massacre continued. The undead creatures that were everywhere had no sense of fear or pain. They were undoubtedly the most terrifying warriors. As long as their souls weren't destroyed, they could continue attacking even if their bodies were smashed to pieces. Under the cover of various auxiliary boundaries, the undead creatures' strength and speed were greatly enhanced. They continuously launched a frenzied assault on the orc warriors. Unknowingly, the orc army that had been eyeing the south border city covetously for the past few years had suffered heavy losses under the combined attacks of Han Shuo and Little Skull. None of the orc powerhouses who were sent to stop them were able to escape from their hands. They were all cleanly blasted into pieces. The enormous orc army, faced with the seemingly endless attacks of the undead creatures that didn't know pain or exhaustion, wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves as they fell into pools of blood. Whoosh! 100-meter-long streak of bloody light ferociously bombarded the tents in the center of the orc army with an earth-shattering momentum. Rumble! The earth trembled, and sand and stones flew everywhere. A row of more than a dozen military tents exploded into pieces with a deafening explosion. Along with the military tents were pieces of bloody flesh. Dozens of military tents and dozens of leaders of the Orc Empire were killed just like that. The orcs are done for. Forenza shouted from the top of the south border city wall. His tone was agitated. Without a leader and experts, just relying on those soldiers will only lead to death. Fanny nodded in agreement. She looked at the orc warriors who were being slaughtered and shook her head with a sigh. Sigh, I don't know why these orcs are so determined to invade our empire. Look at them now. How many of them can survive after what Brian has done? The wars between nations are just that cruel. You don't need to sympathize with them. Too many soldiers and civilians of the south border city have died over the past few years. Their weapons are stained with the blood of the soldiers and civilians of the south border city. Perhaps Brian's arrival is the price they should pay. As a commander, Forenza was obviously not a soft-hearted person. In his eyes, death in war was all too common. He was not the least bit affected by the death of the orc warriors. Having lost the command of their leaders and the protection of their experts, the orc warriors who could only passively defend were defeated as expected. Blood splattered everywhere. One by one, the orc warriors fell to the ground. Their corpses were left on the corpse-strewn ground, At the center of the battlefield, two lofty altars had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The energy stones on the altars glowed brightly and formed two cyclones that were constantly changing shapes. They collected strands of energy from the battlefield to replenish the divine energy in the bodies of those who had set up the altars. Of the two altars, one was shrouded in a dense aura of death, while the other was shimmering in a strange and blurry light. It seemed as though the law of destruction was being performed. The two altars, emitting different energy auras, operated together in the middle of the battlefield. They absorbed and collected the unique energy formed by the death and destruction on the battlefield bit by bit. As the energy of death and destruction on the battlefield increased, the number of orc warriors decreased. Gradually, the mournful, high-pitched howls turned intermittent and finally into silence. Han Shuo reverted to his human form and stood proudly in the void. He looked down at the ground and discovered that the ground was littered with the corpses of orc warriors. It was getting harder and harder to find an orc that was still alive. As far as the eye could see, other than the corpses of the orcs, there were also the undead creatures that were blankly searching for living targets. It seemed that the battle had come to an end. Hovering in midair, Han Shuo could sense strands of drifting energy flowing into his body through the altar at the center of the battlefield, fusing with the divine energy in his body. He could clearly feel the growth of his divine energy. At this moment, as he felt the growth of the energy, Han Shuo gradually understood the intentions of the overgods of death and destruction. By relying on special methods, even though they were separated by multiple planes, through the use of altars and soul imprints, the sovereigns of death and destruction would be able to gain power from both destruction and death. The more people died, the more power they would gain. The death of over 100,000 orc warriors and the energy of destruction on the battlefield were absorbed by the altar that Han Shuo had set up. He could clearly feel the rapid growth of his divine energy. After doing some calculations in his mind, Han Shuo discovered that the energy of destruction caused by the death of over 100,000 orc warriors was equivalent to the power of faith of over 100,000 people over a few decades. It was also equivalent to the decades of silent cultivation of Han Shuo's avatar of destruction. It was no wonder that the overgods of death and destruction would do everything possible to send their subordinates to other material planes to wreak havoc. It was much easier to obtain energy this way than to cultivate on their own. There were thousands of material planes. If countless lives were destroyed in every material plane, then the energy obtained by the overgods of death and destruction would definitely be able to greatly improve their divine energy. Father, they are no longer a threat. I need to go back and digest the energy I just obtained. Just as Han Shuo was thinking, Little Skull sent a message. Looking up, Han Shuo saw Little Skull riding the bone dragon on top of the altar of death. The gravestone on Little Skull's chest was spinning rapidly like a small whirlpool. The altar of death below seemed to have run out of energy and was no longer glowing. MHM, Han Shuo replied. After observing for a while, Han Shuo discovered that the gravestone on Little Skull's chest seemed to have the ability to speed up his absorption of the energy of death. He and Little Skull had set up the altar at almost the same time. Now, not only had Little Skull absorbed all the energy around the altar, even his body had completed the energy conversion, but Han Shuo himself was only halfway through. Naturally, Little Skull would not be courteous with Han Shuo. Riding on the bone dragon, he cast some kind of strange spell. The complicated magic circle in the center of the altar that was supposed to be used to collect the energy of death suddenly shone with a misty green light. One by one, the undead creatures swarmed into the misty green light and disappeared. The undead creatures left as quickly as they came. After a while, the enormous undead creatures returned to the netherworld through the altar under Little Skull. As the caster, Little Skull looked at Han Shuo after seeing that the undead creatures had swarmed into the altar in an orderly manner. "All right, Father, please send me back." Han Shuo was a little surprised, but he did not say anything. He cast a simple necromancy spell, and Little Skull disappeared in a flash of bright light as if he had been caught by space. This guy is getting more and more amazing. Han Shuo smiled and sighed. He was not in a hurry to leave, but instead hovered in place and silently absorbed the energy of destruction on the battlefield through the altar below. The amount of energy of destruction caused by the death of hundreds of thousands of orcs was quite considerable. Without a magical treasure like the gravestone, Han Shuo would need to spend more time and energy to absorb the energy than Little Skull. Han Shuo was not in a hurry. He hovered in the air and communicated with the altar with his soul. He spread out his domain of divinity and formed a spiderweb-like barrier to absorb the energy of destruction gathered by the altar. After a long while, Han Shuo let out a long sigh. He spread his hand and covered the altar below. The altar seemed to be covered by an invisible canvas, disappearing inch by inch under Han Shuo's body. Han Shuo surveyed the surroundings, looked at the corpses strewn all over the battlefield, looked at the messy weapons and armors, shook his head, and flew towards the distant south border city. If it was in the past, Han Shuo would definitely stay and collect the weapons and armor on the ground. However, Han Shuo was no longer the same as before. Those weapons and armor on the ground could no longer enter Han Shuo's eyes. Therefore, he naturally would not waste his time on them. A streak of light flashed past at high speed. A tall and majestic figure appeared beside Firenze, who was still looking at the battlefield in astonishment. For the time being, South Border City should not be facing the threat of the Empire of Orcs again. Clean up the battlefield. Some things are still of some value, said Han Shuo with a faint smile as he looked at Firenze beside him. Firenze snapped out of his shock and turned his head to look at Han Shuo. Firenze, who had always been bold and unrestrained, was actually a little timid at this moment. After staring blankly for a long while, he forced a smile and nodded, saying, "Hundreds of thousands of orcs, gone just like that. Even if the Empire of Orcs still has some military strength, I'm afraid they won't dare to invade our south border city again before the truth is clear." Han Shuo grinned and calmly said, "Oh, that's good. After I've dealt with the great threat that is the Kasi Empire, we can regroup our military strength and attack them instead." Firenze remained silent for a long time after hearing Han Shuo's words. He sized up Han Shuo for a very long time before he finally said, "With you around, the Empire is invincible." Chapter 597. Within one night, Han Shuo's reputation in South Border City had far surpassed that of Firenze, the Lord of the Southern Border. Firenze had stayed in South Border City for 3 years, leading the Empire's most powerful Howling Legion in strenuous defense. However, even when faced with an army of more than 100,000 strong from the Empire of Orcs, they were still forced to retreat step by step. Han Shuo, on the other hand, appeared for the first time in 5 years. With his own strength, he slaughtered more than 100,000 savage orc warriors in less than a day. Since the founding of Lancelot Empire, no one had been able to match his might. Many soldiers and civilians of South Border City had personally witnessed this unprecedented and crazy feat from the top of the city walls. After being oppressed by the orc warriors for so long, the soldiers and civilians of South Border City could only watch helplessly as more than 100,000 orc warriors were annihilated in one day. That kind of excitement was absolutely uncontrollable. No one organized it, but all the soldiers and civilians of South Border City actually flocked to Han Shuo, expressing their gratitude in all kinds of ways. Some offered their personally cooked delicacies, some offered their ancestral armors and weapons to Han Shuo, some even offered their daughters to Han Shuo, hoping that Han Shuo would keep them as his maidservant. But most of all, they cheered again and again, shouting Han Shuo's name at the top of their lungs. It seemed that they wanted to express the excitement in their hearts through this kind of high-spirited cheering. What Han Shuo had done today was destined to become a legend in South Border City. With the threat of the Empire of Orcs gone, the people of South Border City gathered on the streets and cheered in unison, competing to spread the story of Han Shuo's magnificent feat of slaughtering more than 100,000 orc warriors single-handedly. The heavy atmosphere that had been shrouding South Border City had been cleansed by Han Shuo single-handedly. The imagination of the people was astonishing. As they spread the story, Han Shuo's figure grew bigger and bigger. Even though Han Shuo had yet to acknowledge it, the people of South Border City had already treated him as a god. Many people who had no spiritual support had even engraved Han Shua's name on their faith tablets and started to worship him. A single person had killed over 100,000 savage orcs in just one short hour. Aside from God, who else could do such a thing? As a matter of course, Han Shua received the most honorable treatment in the South Border City. When he and Forenza made their way to Han Shua's mansion in the city, all the people along the way were scrambling to kneel down and worship them. They were willing to worship Han Shua as their god. If there are any problems in South Border City or the southern border that you need me to resolve, let me know as soon as possible. I'll help you handle them. Han Shua's low god of destruction body needed some time to digest the energy of destruction formed from the deaths of hundreds of thousands of orc warriors. In addition, it had been a long time since Fanny and Forenza had last seen each other. It was only natural for them to have some time to communicate. After witnessing the terrifying feat previously, Forenza now faced Han Shua without any regard for the consequences. Instead, he was more respectful, reserved, and a little uncomfortable. On one hand, it was because Forenza had been thoroughly awed by Han Shua's strength. On the other hand, it was because Han Shua naturally possessed the aura of a superior after becoming a god. Under these two pressures, Forenza, who had always been uninhibited in the Empire, suddenly seemed like a completely different person when facing Han Shua. All right, I'll make good arrangements in the next few days. If there's any problem that needs to be resolved by force, I won't be courteous with you, Forenza said mischievously. No matter how powerful you are, you're still my son-in-law. Han Shua nodded smilingly and did not say anything else. After giving some instructions to Fanny, he entered the room that Forenza had specially prepared for him and silently digested the energy of destruction formed from the deaths of hundreds of thousands of orc warriors. On the other side, in the dark forest, on the mountain above the place of extreme fire, Tanai, Han Shua, who was sitting cross-legged on a fiery red boulder, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were glistening as he gazed at the cratered ground in front of him. Suddenly, a dull sound came from the depths of the earth. The valley that had been silent for a long time suddenly began to tremble. The magnitude of the tremors grew increasingly greater. A high-pitched dragon's roar suddenly sounded from the depths of the earth. Accompanied by the tremors of the earth, the cracks in the gullies grew larger and larger. Gradually, the corpse of Dark Dragon Gilbert, which had sunk deep into the earth, slowly emerged from the ground. Another dragon's roar sounded. The earth rumbled and trembled violently. As the earth quaked and the mountains swayed, the silhouette of a wriggling dragon soared into the sky and instantly disappeared into the depths of the clouds. Waha! Wild, excited laughter escaped from Dark Dragon Gilbert's mouth. Having been stifled for too long, Gilbert found it hard to suppress the excitement in his heart after his rebirth. He roamed the skies to his heart's content, shouting at the top of his lungs to release the agitation in his heart. "Stop making such a racket. Come down." Han Shua chided with a smile as he lifted his head to look at Dark Dragon Gilbert flying through the air. "I'm coming," Gilbert replied with a hearty laugh. His enormous draconic body swayed a little, and a ray of black light suddenly appeared. His enormous body gradually shrank within the black light, and by the time he landed in front of Han Shua, he had turned into that familiar dark-skinned youth. "Master, I'm back. Gilbert, am back. Ha ha ha." Gilbert was so excited that he danced with joy. He kept hitting his new body, and he seemed to be very satisfied. "You died here, and also resurrected here. I've done what I promised you." Han Shua looked at Dark Dragon Gilbert with a smile and asked, "How's the new body?" "Very good. Very good," Gilbert immediately replied. He twisted his neck, kicked his legs, and added, "There's a surging power in my body. Although it's not quite the same as before, it feels even more powerful." With a thought, Han Shua's lips curled into a satisfied smile. He nodded and praised, "Not bad. You actually melted that small piece of divine crystal. Very good, very good. As long as you comprehend it carefully, it won't be difficult to become a god in the future." "Thank you, Master, haha, thank you, Master." Gilbert couldn't help but shout excitedly as he listened to Han Shua's praise. His voice traveled far and wide, causing many low-level magical beasts to retreat. This is what you deserve. The new body also has some wonderful uses. I think you should have a deep understanding of this yourself. Spend some more time and understand some of the uses of the new body. This will be of great benefit to you in the future, Han Shuo said seriously. Don't worry, Master. I've died once. I'll cherish it. Gilbert put away his mischievous smile and promised Han Shuo. I think this time you should understand the importance of strength. Han Shuo nodded. Master, I want to go back and see my grandfather. Gilbert suddenly spoke in a somewhat sad tone. My father is already dead, and many of the dark dragons have also died. I want to see how they are doing now. Of course. Take a look at how the lizard men in the underground world are doing. If they have any difficulties, I'll help you if I can. Han Shuo had promised the ancient lizard king to take care of the lizard men. Perhaps something had changed in the underground world because of Adele's resurrection. After Gilbert's resurrection, his strength was much higher than before. With his help, the lizard men in the underground world should be better off. Understood, Master. I'll be going then. Gilbert was concerned about the dark dragon race. He didn't know if the Shrine of Ice had caused trouble for the dark dragons again in the years after he left. He left some instructions with Han Shuo and hurriedly left. This guy is still so impatient. Han Shuo couldn't help but laugh when he saw Gilbert leave so quickly. After a while, his face turned cold. He gazed into the depths of the dark forest and recalled that unforgettable hatred. Chapter 598. 5 years ago, in the Dragon Valley in the depths of the dark forest, Han Shuo suffered a great loss that he would never forget. The Primordius Dragon was the most powerful being that Han Shuo had ever encountered on Profound Continent. The Primordius Dragon who had been guarding Profound Continent possessed Logod's strength of Earth. Nobody knew how long he had been in this realm. Han Shuo would never forget this grudge. However, at present, his avatar of death was still digesting the divine essence underground of Bretel City, while his avatar of destruction was digesting the energy of destruction formed from the deaths of the hundreds of thousands of orc warriors. Han Shuo had no confidence in defeating the Primordius Dragon in the Logod realm with just his main body that had reached the Nine Changes realm in demonic arts. Standing in the valley above the place of extreme fire and gazing coldly at the Dragon Valley, Han Shuo did not rush over impulsively. After calming the rage in his heart, Han Shuo coldly groaned and said, I'll let you live for a few more days. When my 3 souls have fused, I will destroy your Dragon Valley and annihilate your dragon soul. Han Shuo took a deep breath, forcibly repressed his impulse, and returned to the cemetery of death. After a short while, Han Shuo returned to the cemetery of death. Sanguiner, Jasper, and the other 2 ladies who had stayed behind in the cemetery of death, as soon as they saw Han Shuo, they clamored to go out and experience this new world. As soon as Han Shuo returned to Profound Continent, he had the 4 stay behind. They had been bored to death for a long time. A material plane different from the Abyss realm had piqued their curiosity. They had been waiting for Han Shuo's return. Now that Han Shuo had returned, they were naturally unwilling to stay in the cemetery of death any longer. Han Shuo did not refuse the urgent request of the 4. After thinking for a moment, he smilingly said, All right, I'll show you around and familiarize you with this world. Haha, Profound Continent is completely different from your Abyss realm. The plants and animals here are more peaceful and won't attack strangers for no reason. Let's go, Han Shuo. This place feels like a prison. Hurry up and take us out to broaden our horizons. Jasper pulled Han Shuo's arm and urged him with a smile. All right, then come with me to experience this world. Han Shuo broke through the barrier and led the group of 4 out of the cemetery of death. The dark forest was lush and verdant, with wildflowers and weeds growing everywhere. The air was fresh, and the sun was bright and beautiful. It was a stark contrast to the gloom of the Abyss realm. The sun hanging high in the sky was especially unique in the Abyss realm. As soon as they walked out of the cemetery of death, the 4 immediately cried out in surprise. The buildings of various styles were generally decorated with exquisite patterns and adorned with many beautiful decorations. This style was obviously different from that of the Abyss realm. Eh, angel, there's an angel there. What a beautiful angel. Almost at the same time as Sylph cried out in surprise, an equally loud cry of surprise came from the crowd of guards in the Valley of Sunshine. The two snow-white wings on Jasper's back were exactly the same as the pure and beautiful angels that the Church of Light promoted. It was no wonder that the Soul Destroyer mercenary band would cry out in surprise. Idiot, that's the enemy. Everyone get ready. It must be the Church of Light launching a large-scale attack. All of a sudden, the members of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band put up their defenses as though they were facing a great enemy. All kinds of crossbow bolts were pointed at Han Shuo and the others. Angels were the symbol of purity and beauty. However, under the propaganda of the Church of Light, angels were also synonymous with the strong. In the Valley of Sunshine, Trunks had long expressed his disgust towards the Church of Light. All these years, he had been constantly at odds with the Church of Light, especially after the Pope of Light solemnly vowed that they had eradicated the greatest heretic, Han Shuo. Under Trunks' leadership, the Valley of Sunshine had long become the enemy of the Church of Light. Under such circumstances, it went without saying what it meant for the legendary powerful warrior angels of the Church of Light to suddenly appear outside the Valley of Sunshine. After a cry of surprise, the members of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band came from all directions. These people were armed with weapons and pointed at Han Shuo and the others from afar, ready to attack at any time. What are you people of the Church of Light doing here? Our Valley of Sunshine doesn't welcome you? A leader shouted angrily and waved his hand. Dozens of people walked out and slowly surrounded Han Shuo and the others. Seeing the members of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band as if they were facing a great enemy, Han Shuo couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect that he would be faced with such a lineup even before entering the Valley of Sunshine. Smiling wryly and shaking his head, Han Shuo felt that this was somewhat absurd. He had single-handedly founded the Soul Destroyer mercenary band. He didn't expect that these fellows would actually point their swords at him. He really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Han Shuo, who are these people? Jasper was stunned. Master, these people seem to think of us as enemies. They aren't very strong. Do you want me to kill them all for Master? Sanguiner's face turned cold as a murderous aura surged from all over his body. He cruelly suggested. Waving his hand, Han Shuo stopped Sanguiner's suggestion. No need, they are all on the same side. It's just that I've been away for too long and these people don't recognize me. Put down your weapons and state your purpose. Otherwise, we will attack, that guard shouted, appearing somewhat nervous. We're on the same side, don't be nervous. Han Shuo explained helplessly. He raised his hand with a wry smile, afraid that these people would do something irrational and then accidentally kill them. Humph, since when did the Church of Light become one of our Soul Destroyer mercenary band's people? Our leader has ordered that no one from the Church of Light is allowed to enter the Valley of Sunshine. If you have something to say, hurry up and say it. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. That person shouted angrily. Tell Trunks to come see me. Is this bastard in the glorious Tanai? Han Shuo raised his hand and shouted somewhat angrily. How dare you insult our leader? As expected, you are from the Church of Light. Everyone, prepare to attack. Take them down first, that person shouted. Everyone swarmed forward, preparing to attack. Master, what should we do? Sanguiner spread out his hands towards Han Shuo. It seems like we can only restrain these guys who don't know the situation. That's the only way. Han Shuo thought to himself. He was also prepared to take them down first, and then wait for Trunks to come over and explain the situation. Stop, you bastards. What are you shouting for when you don't know anything? Just as the battle was about to break out, an explosive shout suddenly rang out. Then, a fiery red shadow rapidly rushed out from the Valley of Sunshine, arriving in front of Han Shuo in the blink of an eye. Lady Candace, why have you come? Those Soul Destroyer mercenary band immediately smiled obsequiously when they saw the newcomer. You blind fools. If I didn't come, you guys would have really attacked. Candace glared at that person and cursed fiercely. The fiery Candace hadn't changed much. She was still wearing her sexy armor, and had a fire magic sword on her back. However, compared to before, she looked a bit more feminine. "Candace, it's you." Han Shua couldn't help but laugh heartily when he saw the newcomer. "I heard news of you from Phoebe, but I didn't really believe it. I didn't think that you would really be all right." "That's great. Trunks has been missing you for a long time." Candace looked at Han Shua and said with genuine joy. Ever since Han Shua met Candace, he knew that she was a pretty good mercenary. However, when he left the Profound Continent back then, Candace and Trunks' Soul Destroyer mercenary band didn't have much interaction. He didn't expect that she would actually be in the Valley of Sunshine this time. Furthermore, when talking about Trunks, Candace's tone was obviously a bit strange. After sizing up Candace with a few odd glances, Han Shua suddenly let out a strange laugh and said, "Candace, don't tell me that you and Trunks are together." It was rare for the usually fiery and bold Candace to blush. She then raised her neck and said in a magnanimous manner, "That's right. Why? Let's go. Trunks will definitely be very happy to see you." With her leading the way, none of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band guards dared to obstruct them, allowing Han Shua and his party to enter unimpeded. However, their hearts were filled with doubts. They didn't know who Han Shua was to actually be treated so warmly and solemnly by Candace. Chapter 599. As they walked deeper into the Valley of Sunshine, Candace and Han Shua chatted merrily, but their eyes kept sneaking glances at Jasper from time to time. Their eyes were filled with puzzlement. Han Shua noticed Candace's sneaking glances. Seeing that she was getting more and more puzzled, he smilingly explained, "Stop looking. She's not an angel that the Church of Light has beautified in your imagination. She just has a pair of snow-white wings." Candace's expression relaxed, and she curiously asked Han Shua in a low voice, "If she's not an angel as the Church of Light claims, then who is she? I've been a mercenary all over the Profound Continent, but I've never heard of such a human." "She's my woman." Han Shua did not reveal Jasper's identity, but only pointed out his relationship with her. Upon hearing Han Shua's words, Jasper shot a hateful glare at Han Shua and said in a low voice, "You scoundrel. You already have 3 beauties in the Empire, and yet you're still flirting with other women." Han Shua smiled, but did not reply to Candace's accusation. He maintained his leisurely posture as they walked deeper into the Valley of Sunshine. Along the way, many merchants in the Valley of Sunshine looked at Han Shua and his party with astonishment. Not only Jasper, who had snow-white wings, but Himana and Sylph, who had sharp spikes growing from their shoulders, elbows, and knees, also attracted a lot of attention. Who are these people? They're so strange. Aren't those the legendary powerful angel warriors of the Church of Light? Why would they appear in the Valley of Sunshine? I remember that the leader of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band had explicitly stated that no one from the Church of Light is allowed to enter the Valley of Sunshine. Didn't you see Candace leading the way? There must be something fishy going on. Discussions about the identities of Han Shua and his party came from the mouths of the surrounding merchants. However, due to Candace's presence, these people deliberately lowered their voices. While those people were discussing Han Shua and his party, Jasper and the other 2 women were also whispering to each other. "What beautiful clothes. The clothes of the people here all have beautiful patterns on them. How unique." Sylph exclaimed. Yeah. And the stones on their necks are all sparkling and dazzling," Himana whispered. "This place is indeed different from where we came from." I can't deny that this place is way ahead of us in terms of food, clothing, housing, and transportation," Jasper affirmed. "These people are much weaker than us. They're too focused on enjoyment, unlike us who are constantly fighting. The strength of these people is generally much weaker than ours. They focus too much on enjoyment, unlike us who are constantly fighting." From Sanguis' words, one could clearly see the difference between men and women. Jasper and the other women showed great interest in beautiful things, while Sanguis snorted disdainfully. As they discussed amongst themselves, the group finally arrived at the back mountain of the Valley of Sunshine under Candace's lead. The territory that had originally belonged to the Cairo mercenary band had now naturally belonged to the Soul Destroyer mercenary band. There was a huge practice field in front of them. Some of the mercenary groups were bare-chested, revealing their sturdy muscles. They were concentrating on practicing their martial skills. Lady Candace. Those people greeted Candace in a friendly manner when they saw her approach. Han Shuo swept his eyes over them and discovered that these people were all unfamiliar faces. It seemed that the Soul Destroyer mercenary band had indeed recruited more and more members while developing at a high speed. Candace, what are these people doing? Don't tell me they're new mercenaries? Haha, newcomers can come over and play? A 2-meter-tall bald man raised a double-edged battle axe in his hand and laughed provocatively. Humph, idiot. With that little bit of ability of yours, you'll only be toyed to death. Candace glared at him disdainfully and attacked him mercilessly. Hearing her words, the bald man was displeased. He glared at her and said in a low, muffled voice, "I don't believe you." Whoosh! A figure shot into the training field in a split second. Sanguiner cast a sidelong glance at the man and sized him up. He gave an objective evaluation. Your limbs are well developed, but the energy within your body is very weak. You can't even withstand a single blow. Brian? Candace stared blankly and then looked at Han Shuo. Sanguiner, don't hurt them. Just knock them down. Han Shuo raised his voice and instructed Sanguiner. He then looked at Candace with a smile. That's my disciple. No matter, let them play. In the world of mercenaries, the strongest fist was the last word. If you defeated them fair and square, you'd only win their respect. Arrogant brat, come. I'll let you have 3 moves. The bald man was obviously infuriated when he heard Sanguiner's words. He lowered the double-edged battle axe in his hand and stuck out his 2 iron-like chest muscles as he spoke arrogantly. Not only can you not withstand a single blow, but you're also simple-minded. Sanguiner shook his head and continued his evaluation. Brat, don't talk nonsense. Knock me down if you have the guts. The bald man saw that Sanguiner was only 1.7 meters tall and didn't have any strong muscles. He didn't think much of Sanguiner and roared angrily like a violent bear as he listened to Sanguiner's continuous taunts. Too easy. Sanguiner laughed coldly and punched out like lightning. His fist turned into a streak of blood red as it landed squarely on the unmoving bald man. Bam! The bald man's 200-pound body flew out as if he were weightless and fell to the ground with a plop. He stared blankly at Sanguiner, who was a dozen steps away from him. He didn't seem to understand the situation for a moment. The mercenaries in the training field who had been waiting to see a joke stared at Sanguiner as if they had seen a ghost. They were all stunned and couldn't figure out how Sanguiner could have such terrifying strength. These people weren't blind. They naturally knew that strength had little to do with body size. However, they observed carefully and didn't notice that Sanguiner had used any fighting aura. Without using any fighting aura, he had sent a 200-pound body flying with just 1 punch. Moreover, the attacker was a small youth. This was a little shocking. Master, I didn't hurt anyone. Sanguiner shrugged at the bald man and spread his hands to show to Han Shuo. All right, let's go. To Han Shuo, this result wasn't surprising. He nodded at Sanguiner and urged Candace to leave. Oh, I know. Candace abruptly came to her senses. She looked at Sanguis up and down with a strange gaze, then turned to Han Shuo, who was her master. She shook her head, sighed, and said, You are becoming more and more unfathomable. I didn't expect that a single disciple of yours would have such miraculous strength. Sigh, no wonder. No wonder what? Han Shuo smiled in a carefree manner. He thought that if that bald man, who was merely a journeyman swordsman, could withstand a punch from Sanguiner, then Sanguiner's body would really be unworthy of its name. No wonder those people in Lancelot Empire would always think of you whenever they were in a difficult situation after you left for 5 years. No wonder Bredel City could possess such formidable strength in just a few short years. Even the neighboring Brute Merchant Alliance doesn't dare to invade, Candace said in a strange tone. Han Shuo laughed dryly, but didn't say a word. He and Candace walked towards the restricted area at the back of the mountain. When they arrived at the back of the mountain, the number of familiar faces increased. Grant was explaining the rules of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band to a group of new mercenaries. When he saw Han Shuo suddenly appear, he was immediately dumbfounded and didn't say a word. He just stared blankly at Han Shuo. Lord Grant, what's wrong? The newly recruited mercenaries didn't know what was going on. Seeing Grant suddenly go silent at the crucial moment, they couldn't help but ask in puzzlement. Ah! An ear-piercing shriek came from Grant's mouth. The mercenaries who were attentively listening to his explanation were so frightened by his sudden shriek that they trembled all over. Under the gazes of the new mercenaries, Grant screamed and rushed towards Han Shuo like lightning. He was extremely pleasantly surprised as he said, "Lord Brian, you're not dead? I won't die that easily." Hee. Seeing Grant's heartfelt surprise, Han Shuo's heart warmed as he nodded and smiled. "Brian? Who's that? Brian?" A cry of alarm came from a stone house. Soon after, a person stumbled out and looked towards the source of the voice. Another cry resounded throughout the valley. Heavens, it's really Brian. Odysseus was wild with joy. Like Grant, he rushed to Han Shuo's side and laughed heartily as he hugged Han Shuo and shook him with all his might. Odysseus and the others had a closer relationship with Han Shuo. It was also because of Han Shuo that they joined the Soul Destroyer mercenary band. Currently, Odysseus and the others had all become the upper echelons of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band. However, they were still as forthright and uninhibited as before. "You're all here. Hee, very good. It looks like the Soul Destroyer mercenary band is getting better and better." Han Shuo was also very happy to see his old friends. "Come, let's go inside and find Trunks for a drink. That guy has been training alone in his room all day. He's getting more and more hard-working." Odysseus had joined the Soul Destroyer mercenary band because of Han Shuo. He naturally knew that the true master of the Soul Destroyer mercenary band was Han Shuo. Odysseus, on the other hand, didn't particularly respect the revered Trunks. He still treated him as a comrade like before. The group chatted and laughed as they walked to the back of the valley. Trunks came over after hearing the news. When he saw Han Shuo, he also came over and gave Han Shuo a fierce manly hug. Soon after, he shouted, "Brothers, bring the wine. Let's drink to our heart's content today." Saying so, Trunks tightly hugged Han Shuo and said in a low voice, "I knew you wouldn't die so easily." "Nonsense. How could I be so easily killed?" Han Shuo laughed heartily. In a short while, many of his former friends had all gathered together. As soon as Trunks gave the order, large bowls of wine and meat were served. The mercenaries were originally boorish and unrestrained. When the leaders gave the order, all of them couldn't control themselves as they laughed and drank heartily. Those mercenaries who had just joined the Soul Destroyer mercenary band were all indescribably excited when they learned of Han Shuo's identity. They took the opportunity to toast their idol, expressing their worship through drinking heartily. Back in the Valley of Sunshine, Han Shuo was a true idol. In the Lancelot Empire, he had never been defeated. Such a character was the one these mercenaries admired the most. Therefore, when they heard that the person who had arrived was the legend of the Empire, the expert that the three goddesses had bitterly waited for 5 years, their blood began to boil. The Valley of Sunshine was instantly brimming with a joyous atmosphere. Chapter 600. After large bowls of wine and meat, everyone was a bit tipsy. At this time, Han Shuo and Trunks arrived at a secluded rock in the back of the mountain. The mountain breeze caressed their faces and the air was fresh. The two were in a very good mood after reuniting after a long time. Trunks was still a great swordmaster. After spending 5 years in the great swordmaster realm, his fighting aura had become increasingly pure. However, perhaps due to the lack of opportunity, he had yet to make a breakthrough. 5 years felt like a lifetime had passed since the two had last seen each other. Han Shuo, in particular, had become a true god in the short span of 5 years. Although he hadn't deliberately displayed his strength, Trunks could still vaguely sense the powerful aura emanating from his soul. "Brian, what realm are you at now? Why can't I sense any fighting aura or magic aura from you?" Trunks frowned as he looked at Han Shuo. He had carefully observed him for a long time, but still couldn't discern what martial arts technique Han Shuo was training in. The demonic arts that Han Shuo trained in didn't have the aura of the element of death or the edict of destruction. All of the energy was hidden deep within his body, so Trunks naturally couldn't detect any clues. Smiling faintly, Han Shuo didn't provide any explanation on this question. Instead, he asked Trunks, "Oh right, have you settled your grudge with Caesar City?" Shaking his head, Trunks sighed softly and answered, "Not yet. Radley Pillon's Caesar City is heavily guarded. The Kasi Empire has been pressuring us step by step these past few years, and Valen City has instead been very passive. Although my Valley of Sunshine has developed rapidly, we are still founded on merchants and mercenaries. We are still somewhat lacking compared to the machinations of a country." Nodding, Han Shuo understood that Trunks was speaking the truth. The Valley of Sunshine was situated between 3 countries, and was situated in the middle of a mountain range. It was precisely because of this that there were advantages and disadvantages. It wasn't easy for Trunks to develop the Valley of Sunshine to such a scale. It would be exceedingly difficult for him to go one step further and contend with the country. Han Shuo was about to say a few words of consolation when Trunks' expression suddenly turned cold as he said faintly, "The Valley of Sunshine can't contend against Caesar City. This is a fact. However, I've personally killed more than a dozen direct relatives of Radley Pillon's family over the past 5 years. Radley Pillon's uncle, nephew, and even his wife and son have all been assassinated by me. I want him to taste the pain of being abandoned by his family." Han Shuo felt a chill in his heart as he looked at the sinister Trunks. He thought to himself that Radley Pillon probably wouldn't be able to sleep well after provoking such an enemy. The immediate family members of Radley Pillon's family died one after another. Even his beloved woman and son were killed. That kind of torture must have been very painful for Radley Pillon. Han Shuo had originally wanted to say a few words of consolation to Trunks, but after hearing Trunks' words, he knew that Trunks definitely didn't need his consolation after going through such a slow massacre. Judging from Trunks' appearance, he seemed to be enjoying the process of forcing Radley Pillon to his death step by step. He probably wasn't in a hurry to get rid of Radley Pillon in one fell swoop. "So that's how it is. You brat, you're getting more and more sinister." Han Shuo laughed involuntarily as he teased Trunks. The Dark Forest and the Lizard Men in the underground world are all under the control of our Soul Destroyer mercenary band. You've been gone for 5 years, so you may not know the situation. Let me introduce to you the current distribution of strength in the Valley of Sunshine. Trunks chuckled. "No need." Han Shuo interrupted Trunks' introduction and looked deeply at Trunks. "I believe that you will handle these matters well. I won't ask about the Soul Destroyer mercenary band's matters in the future. You just need to know what you're doing." At Han Shuo's level of strength, he didn't even care about some countries, not to mention a small power like the Soul Destroyer mercenary band. As long as Han Shuo was willing, he could destroy the Soul Destroyer mercenary band with a wave of his hand, or even rebuild a power of the same scale. The higher one stood, the further one could see. Even the Abyss realm completely belonged to him. What could a mere Soul Destroyer mercenary band amount to? No matter what, the Soul Destroyer mercenary band will always be yours. Even if you've forgotten, I won't. Trunks clearly understood the meaning behind Han Shuo's words. He knew that Han Shuo had plans to let go of the mercenary band. After a moment of silence, Trunks suddenly guaranteed. Laughing heartily, Han Shuo patted Trunks' shoulder and said, "There's no need for such words between us. Come, come, let's continue drinking. Drink?" "All right, I'll accompany you to truly get drunk today." Trunks laughed heartily. Naturally, Han Shuo wouldn't get drunk. That day, most of the people got drunk. Even Trunks, who had reached the realm of Great Swordmaster, got drunk without using his fighting aura to filter out the alcohol. However, Han Shuo's demonic body was special. Even if he didn't take any measures, he still wouldn't fall into such a dizzy state. The next day, while Trunks and the others were still unconscious, Han Shuo found Sanguiner and Jasper and instructed them to stay and play in the Valley of Sunshine for the time being. He then left the Valley of Sunshine alone. Deep within the Dark Forest, outside the Dragon Valley, Han Shuo stealthily arrived outside the Dragon Valley and laid in ambush. After waiting for half a day, The other two avatars of his arrived one after the other. After his avatar of destruction absorbed the energy of destruction formed from the deaths of hundreds of thousands of orcs at the south border city, the divine energy in his body grew. He also gained some new understanding of the utilization of divine energy and the edict of destruction. This laid the foundation for the breakthrough of this avatar of Han Shua's. The advancement of the divine realm was an extremely long process. The three realms of low god, mid god, and high god might take tens of thousands of years to complete the advancement process. In other words, a god might need to stay in the same realm for tens of thousands of years or even longer. Those who entered the same realm first and spent many years in it would usually be able to surpass those who had just entered the same realm in the utilization of elemental energy and edict energy. It was precisely for this reason that the same divine realm was divided into three stages: early, middle, and late. Those who cultivated to the peak of the late stage of the divine realm would be much stronger than those who had just entered the same realm. Although both of Han Shua's avatars were low gods, as they had just entered this realm, their divine energy was relatively weak and their understanding of divine energy and the edict of elemental energy was not deep enough. Both of them were early-stage low gods and were far from reaching the stage of mid-stage low god. The reason why Han Shua was not in a hurry to seek revenge on the Primordius Dragon was that he did not know which stage of low god the Primordius Dragon had reached. There was no doubt that a late-stage low god could easily defeat an early-stage or mid-stage low god in the same realm. After the arrival of his two avatars, Han Shua carefully sensed for a moment. It had to be said that the advancement of the divine realm was indeed a slow process. Although his avatar of destruction had absorbed the energy of destruction formed from the deaths of hundreds of thousands of orcs, and his avatar of death had digested the divine energy of a divine essence, it was still far from the stage of mid-stage. The two avatars once again concealed themselves in Han Shua's body. Gazing at the Dragon Valley that was just inches away from him, Han Shua pondered for a moment before he resolutely decided to enter and settle old scores with the Primordius Dragon. Han Shua did not know which stage of low god the Primordius Dragon was at. However, with his demonic arts having reached the Nine Changes realm, Han Shua had mastered a few secret techniques. Even if the Primordius Dragon was a late-stage low god, if Han Shua was no match for him, he could still easily escape. Han Shua, who possessed 3 souls, was confident that he could easily defeat a mid-stage low god. However, if the Primordius Dragon was really a late-stage low god, Han Shua had no certainty of victory. Fortunately, with his demonic arts, Han Shua was not afraid that he would not be able to escape. With a surefire plan in place, Han Shua no longer hesitated. He raised his head and let out a long howl. His body turned into a rainbow and shot towards the Dragon Valley. The boundary along the way could not stop Han Shua in the slightest. With a wave of the demonic blades in Han Shua's hand, the boundary was destroyed without the slightest hindrance. The moment Han Shua broke through the boundary and charged towards the Dragon Valley, he immediately caused a commotion in the Dragon Valley. As Han Shua's howl soared into the sky, a high-pitched dragon roar suddenly came from the Dragon Valley. A third-order silver dragon wriggled its enormous body and charged straight at Han Shua, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. It breathed out dragon breath and bellowed thunderously, "Lowly human, how dare you trespass into the Dragon Valley? You're courting death. Haha, worm. Let's see who's the lowly one today." Han Shua sneered. Without conjuring either of his avatars, he directly grabbed at the third-order silver dragon. When Han Shua grabbed at the silver dragon, his body suddenly transformed and grew bigger and bigger in the void. By the time his hand reached the silver dragon, Han Shua had already turned into a 50-meter-tall giant. Before the silver dragon could react, Han Shua, who had transformed into a giant, grabbed the silver dragon's head and tail with both hands. The silver dragon was only 20 meters long. Compared to the current Han Shua, it was just a slightly larger snake. Han Shua laughed maniacally and pulled with force. The silver dragon's 10-meter-long body was directly torn into several pieces. Dragon tendons mixed with blood sprayed everywhere. 9 was the extreme number. The Nine Changes realm also meant that one could take on a myriad of transformations and transcendence energy. Apart from the implication that 9 was the extreme, the Nine Changes realm also had 9 transformations that needed to be practiced. They were speed change, body change, heart change, divine sense change, bloodlust change, space change, earth change, sky change, and demonic change. Each of these 9 transformations had its own unique function. Ever since Han Shuo reached the Nine Changes realm, he had only just mastered speed change and body change. As for the remaining 7 transformations, Han Shuo was still diligently comprehending them. Chapter 601. Speed change was what Han Shuo had relied on this time. He could instantly raise his speed to a height that others couldn't hope to match. However, when he used speed change, he couldn't use any other demonic arts to attack. No matter how one looked at it, it seemed like he was using it to escape. Body change was a transformation of the body. Han Shuo transformed into a 50-meter-tall giant precisely because of this transformation. Mind change was a transformation of the state of mind. It could keep one's state of mind at its best during any battle. Consciousness change allowed Han Shuo to see through the minutest details, sense inexplicable dangers, and constantly pay attention to his opponent's state during battle. On the other hand, the bloodlust change could cause Han Shuo to fall into a demonic trance in an instant, turning him into a cold, emotionless, bloodthirsty demon with no sense of pain. This bloodlust change could only be grasped and deployed after the body, mind, and consciousness transformations were completed. Space change, earth change, and sky change were 3 killing moves that utilized heaven and earth. Omen change was a transformation that must be mastered before one could become an omen. Even Chu Kanglin hadn't mastered it back then. At the Nine Changes realm, one could cultivate all 9 transformations. Once all 9 transformations were mastered, one could break through to the next level, the Omen realm. After transforming into a 50-meter-tall giant, Han Shuo was like an ancient demonic god that descended upon the Dragon Valley. He let out an earth-shattering roar, and the entire Dragon Valley seemed to be shaken by a great earthquake. The rumbling sound never stopped. "Who's there?" A furious roar came from the depths of the Dragon Valley. A rank 5 golden dragon transformed into a streak of golden light and soared into the sky from a hill. As soon as this golden dragon emerged, other dragons flew out from the various mountain ranges around the Dragon Valley. Each and every one of them glared at Han Shuo, wishing they could tear this intruder into pieces. "You're a titan?" When the rank 5 golden dragon flew out and saw Han Shuo's enormous body, its angry expression turned into shock and it cried out in surprise. The race of titans had once enjoyed a period of glory on Profound Continent. With their enormous bodies and boundless strength, the race of titans had always been praised as a race of primordial gods. Even the race of great dragons dared not underestimate the race of titans. When the Type 5 golden dragon saw how huge Han Shuo was, he immediately linked him to the titan race that had disappeared for a long time. "No." Han Shuo glared fiercely at the rank 5 golden dragon and said sinisterly, "5 years ago, when the space-time discontinuum was torn apart, I came to help you out of goodwill. In the end, your primordious dragons cut off the planar passage. Do you still remember me?" As soon as these words came out, all the dragons were shocked. Some of the dragons who had experienced that great change carefully looked at Han Shuo for a while. Suddenly, a dragon roared, "So it's you, that evil necromancer? Ha ha ha. It's me. You didn't expect this, did you? I'm still alive, and I'm doing very well." Han Shuo threw his head back and laughed maniacally. He said fiercely, "Where's that primordious dragon who claims to be the guardian of Profound Continent? Come out and see if you can seal me in another dimension." "Evil heretic, the Dragon Valley isn't a place where you can run wild." The rank 5 golden dragon roared and charged at Han Shuo. After learning that Han Shuo wasn't a titan, the golden dragon no longer had any misgivings. He charged at Han Shuo furiously, intending to tear Han Shuo apart. "Worm, you're courting death." Han Shuo's face turned cold. He similarly flew towards the golden dragon with his enormous body. His enormous body left a monstrous shadow in the Dragon Valley. In the blink of an eye, he arrived before the golden dragon. The demonic blades were unsheathed. Dazzling rays of light burst out from his claws and pierced towards the golden dragon's body. Han Shua's sharp claws sank into the golden dragon's body and began to stir violently. This rank 5 golden dragon could be considered a top-notch expert on profound continent, possessing strength on par with human demigods. Unfortunately, Han Shua's strength far surpassed his, and the demonic blades were sharper than he had imagined. Even the golden dragon, known to have the strongest physical body, couldn't withstand a single stab from Han Shua. The golden dragon's body was mangled and blood flowed down the valley like a small waterfall. Eowo! The golden dragon howled mournfully. He twisted his body and coiled around Han Shua's enormous body. He exerted all his strength to tighten his grip, intending to break Han Shua. Hee. Han Shua sneered cruelly. He turned a blind eye to the struggle of the golden dragon. He abruptly pulled the demonic blades out of the dragon's body, then paused in midair for a moment before ruthlessly stabbing them back in again. Han Shua grinned maliciously as he stirred the golden dragon's body. Arg! The golden dragon shrieked miserably. He did his utmost to coil around Han Shua's body. However, after undergoing the 9 changes, Han Shua's body had become abnormally tough. The golden dragon's seemingly indomitable strength did not have the slightest effect on Han Shua. Kill him! Kill this heretic! Tanai and all the other great dragons soared into the sky and charged at Han Shua. Suddenly, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Flames and icicles shot towards Han Shua. All kinds of magic were released by the dragons, surging towards Han Shua. From today onwards, Dragon Valley shall be called Dragon Tomb, Han Shua said with a sneer. He raised the demonic blades in his right hand and ruthlessly stabbed them into the golden dragon's head. With a sinister grin, Han Shua twisted the blade twice. The golden dragon's head was reduced to mush, its life force slowly fading away. Han Shua then flung the doomed golden dragon far away. It crashed into a hill with a loud rumble. Blood gushed out of its body. It was obvious that it would not survive. With a sway of his body, Han Shua's enormous body evaded the numerous magic attacks. He suddenly appeared next to another green dragon. He stomped on the green dragon and pressed down with all his might, sending the green dragon straight into the Dragon Valley below. Han Shua landed on the ground and stomped a few more times. The green dragon was badly mutilated by Han Shua's stomps. It was beyond dead. Fight him! All the great dragons went berserk. They gathered together and attacked Han Shua with all their might. Unfortunately, the difference in strength between these dragons and Han Shua was too great. There was no way he could make up for the huge disparity in strength with numbers. Han Shua, who had the intention to bathe the Dragon Valley in blood, did not show the slightest bit of mercy. In order to save time, Han Shua split into 3. 2 low-god avatars appeared one after the other and began slaughtering the dragons in the Dragon Valley. Among these great dragons, the strongest was only rank 5. Faced with 3 Han Shuas, they didn't even have the chance to escape. In just a few minutes, a total of 17 great dragons were brutally slaughtered by Han Shua. The Dragon Valley had become a dragon tomb in name only. Is the primordious dragon really not here? After all the great dragons in the Dragon Valley were killed by Han Shua couldn't help but wonder why the primordious dragon did not show up. Ever since he entered the Dragon Valley, Han Shua had patrolled the entire Dragon Valley with his consciousness. However, he did not detect the aura of the primordious dragon. At first, Han Shua thought that the primordious dragon was too powerful for his consciousness to detect. Therefore, Han Shua killed his way here to force the primordious dragon to show up. Han Shua did not expect that the primordious dragon would still not show up even after all the great dragons were killed. It seemed that the primordious dragon was really not in the Dragon Valley. After pondering for a moment with his brows bunched, Han Shua collected the dragon crystals, dragon eyes, and dragon tendons from the great dragons Tanai killed. He also took away the valuables from the great dragons. Then, He spread out his consciousness and carefully sensed the activity in the Dragon Valley. Just now, when Han Shuo was at the bottom of the Dragon Valley, he sensed some aura. At first, he thought that it was the Primordius Dragon. But now, he knew that it was definitely not the Primordius Dragon. Otherwise, if the Primordius Dragon was down there, it would have attacked him long ago. After casting a necromancy magic, Earth Elite Zombie appeared and pointed at the Dragon Valley below him. Han Shuo ordered Earth Elite Zombie to break open the ground. After Han Shuo gave the order, Earth Elite Zombie sank deep into the ground. Soon after, an enormous hole was torn open in the ground. Han Shuo descended through the hole. Not long after, he sensed a boundary of divinity of Earth. Earth Elite Zombie spread out his hands and looked at Han Shuo helplessly. He transmitted, "I can go in by myself, but I can't break open this place." As the beloved child of the Earth, Earth Elite Zombie had a unique advantage in using the Yuan energy of Earth. Although the boundary deployed by the Primordius Dragon was extremely powerful, it still couldn't trap him. It was just that a godly expert was indeed formidable. Although Earth Elite Zombie could enter and exit at will, he had no way to break the boundary deployed by the Primordius Dragon. "What's the situation inside?" Han Shuo bunched his brows and asked Earth Elite Zombie. "There are 3 people," Earth Elite Zombie replied. 3 people? Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. He thought to himself, those who can be sealed by the Primordius Dragon must be very powerful. Han Shuo was rather curious. He unfolded his consciousness to probe the boundary of Earth, wondering if he should expend his divine energy to break it open. Who are they?" Han Shuo asked Earth Elite Zombie after hesitating for a moment. It wasn't that Han Shuo didn't have a way to break the boundary below, but it would consume some of Han Shuo's divine energy. If there were 3 unimportant people below, then breaking the boundary wouldn't be of much benefit to him. That was why Han Shuo had asked this question. "I don't know," Earth Elite Zombie replied straightforwardly. "Go and ask. Ask them what their names are." Earth Elite Zombie possessed the ability to communicate with the soul. Han Shuo believed that those sealed by the boundary were no ordinary people and should know how to communicate with the soul. After Han Shuo gave the order, Earth Elite Zombie went back down. Soon after, Earth Elite Zombie walked out and transmitted to Han Shuo 3 people. They are called Pegasus, Gree, and Ermite Cotton. Ermite Cotton. Han Shuo shrieked and mumbled. The founding expert of Lancelot Empire, the demigod Magus of Darkness, Ermite Cotton. It's actually him. Chapter 602. When Han Shuo was still a magic apprentice, he had heard people mention the name Ermite Cotton. It was all thanks to Ermite Cotton that Lancelot Empire was able to establish itself and become one of the most powerful nations on Profound Continent. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that without Ermite Cotton, there would be no Lancelot Empire. 500 years ago, just as Lancelot Empire was sharpening their swords and preparing to invade other nations, Ermite Cotton, the guardian of Lancelot Empire, mysteriously disappeared. Due to Ermite Cotton's mysterious disappearance, Lancelot Empire was supposed to continue expanding its territory. Other nations had no more misgivings and joined forces to stop Lancelot Empire's march of conquest. From then on, Lancelot Empire was no longer able to be domineering. No citizen of Lancelot Empire would ever forget the glory the Empire had enjoyed when Ermite Cotton was still around. Ermite Cotton had also become one of the most memorable great figures of the Lancelot Empire. Han Shuo did not expect that the one imprisoned deep within the Dragon Valley was actually the pride of Lancelot Empire, the demigod existence of darkness, Ermite Cotton. After learning from Earth Elite Zombie that Ermite Cotton was imprisoned below, Han Shuo decided to blast open the barrier. There was now a reasonable explanation for Ermite Cotton's mysterious disappearance 500 years ago. Although Han Shuo didn't know the reason, he was certain that Ermite Cotton's imprisonment had something to do with the Primordius Dragon. 500 years ago, Ermite Cotton was already a demigod expert. It was likely that only the guardian of Profound Continent, the Primordius Dragon, could imprison him. After learning that the one imprisoned below was Ermite Cotton, Han Shuo sent Earth Elite Zombie back to the Netherworld. His avatar of destruction transformed into the Demon's Lair Edge and was tightly gripped in Han Shuo's hand. The energy of destruction on the Demon's Lair Edge was suddenly released by Han Shuo's avatar and violently bombarded the barrier below. Bang! A loud sound came from the barrier. His other avatar of death suddenly released necromancy magic. Tens of thousands of bone spears shot towards the barrier like an avalanche. The Demon's Lair Edge, which had just struck out with its greatest strength, once again exerted force and stabbed at the boundary. The three bodies exerted their strength together and continuously bombarded the Primordius Dragon's Earth Attribute boundary. The divine power contained in the boundary was rapidly depleted by the continuous attacks. Kacha! The Earth Attribute enchantment finally couldn't withstand the attacks of the three Han Shuos, and it broke with a loud sound. After such a series of attacks without any fancy moves, Han Shuo roughly deduced that the Primordius Dragon possessed strength of a mid-stage low god. This deduction was based on the time that Han Shuo spent attacking with all his might. If the Primordius Dragon did not make a breakthrough after deploying the boundary, Han Shuo was confident that he could kill the Primordius Dragon the next time they meet. Letting out a sigh of relief, Han Shuo spread out his spiritual awareness and immediately felt three strong auras from below the broken barrier. Before Han Shuo could take a closer look, he heard frenzied shouts coming from below. He saw three silhouettes flickering as they soared into the sky from the broken boundary. Great dragons! Damn dragons! I will skin you alive and pull out your tendons. A strong-looking old man bellowed at the sky. He had a head of messy, fiery red long hair. He was approximately 2 meters tall, and his body was covered in bulging muscles. His triangular eyes shone with a cruel and evil light. He did not look like a benevolent being. "Pegasus, keep your voice down," a sweet-looking little girl said in a gentle voice. This little girl had a head of long, emerald green hair and appeared to be only 12 or 13 years old. She had a pair of pointy ears like a forest elf. However, she didn't have the peaceful aura of a forest elf. Instead, she appeared rather demonic. Who opened the boundary? The last one was a sinister-looking old man. He wore a tattered, ancient magical robe. His voice was deep and slow. His body seemed to be able to absorb light, making him look very gloomy. They appeared to be three humans. However, after Han Shuo probed with his consciousness, he immediately discovered that other than the last sinister-looking old man, the other two weren't human. The old man wearing the tattered, ancient magical robe should be the former pride of Lancelot Empire, Embark Cotton. This could be deduced from the pattern on his magical robe. As for the strong-looking old man named Pegasus, Han Shuo detected the existence of a magical beast crystal core in his body. He appeared to be a very powerful magical beast. As for that sweet-looking little girl with long emerald green hair, based on Han Shuo's understanding of the various races on Profound Continent, he guessed that she was a banshee, an extremely rare species on Profound Continent. A human, a magical beast, and a banshee. The three experts trapped in the boundary by the Primordius Dragon possessed astonishing strength. Among them, Embark Cotton's strength had advanced a step further after 500 years, advancing from demigod realm to base god realm. The banshee, on the other hand, cultivated in the elemental energy of wind and possessed base god strength. As for the strong-looking magical beast, the magical beast crystal core in his body was rather odd. Han Shuo's consciousness was unable to determine his actual strength through the magical beast crystal core. "Young lad, were you the one who broke the boundary and saved us?" Embark Cotton asked in astonishment when he saw Han Shuo standing towering beneath the boundary. Han Shuo put on a faint smile and replied in a refined and courteous manner, "That's right. The three of you are free. Handsome man, thank you for your rescue. How can we repay you?" The banshee named Gree smiled sweetly at Han Shuo. She looked like an innocent little girl. "It's very simple. I gave you your freedom, and you will serve me," Han Shuo said to the three in a natural manner. "What do you mean?" Pegasus the magical beast widened his eyes and shouted. Han Shuo swept his gaze across the three and smilingly said, "Follow me, and I guarantee that you will not be imprisoned by the Primordius Dragon again." With just you? Pegasus looked up and down at Han Shuo distrustfully. He grinned and said, "Do you think that we will become your slaves just because you saved us by a fluke?" Fluke? Han Shuo faintly smiled. Soon after, he pondered for a moment. When he saw that the three were looking at him with twinkling eyes, he smilingly said, "Ermite Cotton is the founding minister of our Lancelot Empire. Naturally, I will give him the respect he deserves." After a short pause, Han Shuo's expression turned cold. He looked at the Banshee and Pegasus and said, "As for the two of you, you can either obediently follow me and work for me or die." Hee, what a big temper. I like it. The Banshee Gree giggled. Gree the Banshee giggled and looked at Han Shuo with interest. Then, she asked curiously, "Was it really you who broke that stubborn dragon seal? Was he a citizen of the Lancelot Empire?" Ermite Cotton, who was just as displeased, suddenly asked in a pleasantly surprised manner after hearing Han Shuo's words. Han Shuo did not answer the Banshee's question. Instead, he smilingly said to Ermite Cotton, "That's right. I have now inherited your unfinished business, and that is to unify the entire profound continent with Lancelot Empire." What an arrogant youngster. Do you think that old dragon will allow you to run amok? Pegasus glared at Han Shuo and bellowed in a deep voice, "I will kill him. I believe that the dead old dragon won't stop me, right?" Han Shuo smiled confidently. What an arrogant youngster. It doesn't matter if you have the capability or not. It is already extraordinary of you to have such an idea, Ermite Cotton said with a big smile. After learning that Han Shuo was from the Lancelot Empire, Ermite Cotton's attitude towards Han Shuo immediately changed drastically. "Ermite Cotton, you old thing, you aren't going to help him deal with us, are you?" Pegasus glared at Ermite Cotton and shouted, "We have been imprisoned together for so many years. You aren't going to help an outsider, are you? You too, killing you is as easy as flipping my hand. Why would I need someone else's help?" Han Shuo sized up the two with a gloomy face and coldly groaned, "The primordius dragon is still a little merciful. He has only imprisoned you two. But if you two dare to provoke me, I will kill you without hesitation." Upon finishing those words, Han Shuo abruptly unfolded the domain of divinity of death with the energy of his avatar. Then, with a change of his divine energy, he enveloped the domain of divinity of destruction. Pegasus, who was about to say something, suddenly sensed the bizarre changes in the surrounding space. His expression changed dramatically. Gree the Banshee shuddered and cried out in surprise, "Domain of divinity. Two domains of divinity. You? Who are you? Where are you from?" Ermite Cotton was also shocked. He stared at Han Shuo and cried out involuntarily, "I really am a citizen of the Lancelot Empire. You will know this after we leave the Dragon Valley," Han Shuo replied. Perhaps it was because Ermite Cotton had too much influence on the Lancelot Empire. Han Shuo had some respect for this expert who disappeared 500 years ago. Therefore, Han Shuo couldn't help but explain after hearing Ermite Cotton's question. "What do you two say?" Ermite Cotton stared blankly for a moment. Soon after, he looked at the Banshee and Pegasus with a complicated expression and mumbled to himself, "I'm no match for him anyway. There's no point in resisting. Old thing, do you think we have any other way out?" Gree the Banshee put on a bitter face. She cutely shrugged and said helplessly, "If we don't want to die, that is the only way out," Ermite Cotton said in a deep voice. The three looked at each other and hesitated for a moment before they simultaneously bowed respectfully at Han Shuo and lowered their proud heads. 500 years ago, they might have been all-powerful experts on profound continent. However, 500 years later, Han Shuo had appeared out of nowhere and was much stronger than them. Therefore, they had no other choice but to submit to him. Han Shuo took a step forward and helped Ermite Cotton to his feet. He sincerely said, "As citizens of the Lancelot Empire, we walk the same path and our enemies are the same. There is no need to be overly courteous." Chapter 603. In the history of Profound Continent, there had been many mighty characters. Ermite Cotton and the other two were characters who transcended an era. The three of them once played extremely important roles on the stage of Profound Continent. However, the Primordius Dragon felt that their existence had disturbed the normal order of Profound Continent. Therefore, he imprisoned the three beneath the Dragon Valley. Although the three of them possessed formidable strength, there was still a significant gap between them and the Primordius Dragon, the guardian of Profound Continent. Before the Primordius Dragon made his move, they could stir up havoc and run amok. But when the Primordius Dragon made his move, they could only surrender without putting up a fight. As the guardian of Profound Continent, the Primordius Dragon did not exterminate the three. After capturing them, he merely imprisoned them and did not take their lives. After listening to Ermite Cotton's narration, Han Shuo learned that the Forbidden Land in the Dark Forest was the place where the three of them were captured. In that Forbidden Land, there were many unruly magical beasts who were punished to death for challenging the Primordius Dragon's dignity. "I'm going to settle the score with that old dragon," Pegasus said furiously after listening to Ermite Cotton's simple recount of the incident. Han Shuo looked at Pegasus disdainfully and said with a faint smile, "Even 10 of you combined wouldn't be a match for the Primordius Dragon." Pegasus was a manticore who had had one fortuitous encounter after another. Although he wasn't a transcendent magical beast, he was lucky enough to obtain the crystal cores of 2 transcendent magical beasts that had died in battle. After absorbing the crystal cores of the 2 transcendent magical beasts, Pegasus underwent a mutation. After many years of painstaking cultivation, he broke through his shackles in one fell swoop and possessed mighty strength that surpassed rank 5. The ancient lizard king Degasi that Han Shuo encountered in the underground world was merely a rank 5 magical beast. According to the classification of magical beasts, Pegasus should possess rank 6 strength, which was equivalent to a base god in the general sense. However, no matter how powerful a base god was, when facing a low god, the Primordius Dragon, there was only death. There was absolutely no chance of survival. Damn it! Are we going to swallow this insult after being imprisoned for so many years? Upon hearing Han Shuo's words, Pegasus knew that it was impossible for him to take revenge on the Primordius Dragon given his strength. He shouted furiously, "No, I must take revenge. Even if we can't kill that Primordius Dragon, we should at least kill his descendants." "You won't have the chance." Han Shuo smiled and pointed at the Dragon Valley. "Take a closer look. Do you still have a chance to attack?" Pegasus looked around and found the ground littered with dragon corpses. The badly mangled corpses of more than a dozen giant dragons were lying in disorder around the Dragon Valley. They had long lost all signs of life. You've already killed all of them?" the female demon exclaimed in shock. Han Shuo nodded and said calmly, "That's right. Other than the Primordius Dragon who left, all the dragons in the Dragon Valley died here." "This is bad. That Primordius Dragon definitely won't let you off. Back then, we did not offend the dragons. That's why we were imprisoned under the Dragon Valley. Those experts who hunted and killed the dragons weren't as fortunate as us. All of them were killed by the Primordius Dragon. I believe that once the Primordius Dragon learns that you're the culprit, he will kill you at all costs and not simply imprison you." Gri, the female demon, said with a frown. She seemed worried for Han Shuo. "It doesn't matter. If the Primordius Dragon hasn't made any progress after deploying the boundary of God, the next time I run into him will be the day he dies." Han Shuo's face turned cold as he proudly said, "If the Primordius Dragon was still a mid-stage low god, with his 2 early-stage low god avatars, in addition to his main body and little skull, Han Shuo was certain that he could slay the Primordius Dragon. Therefore, Han Shuo wasn't being arrogant when he said those words. If you can really kill the Primordius Dragon, the Profound Continent will really be ruled by our Lancelot Empire." Ermite Cotton was overjoyed and appeared extremely excited. "You will see that day come." Han Shuo put on a confident smile. He then looked around and said, "But before that, let's first resolve the current crisis facing Lancelot Empire. What should we do?" As the founder of Lancelot Empire, Ermite Cotton had not let go of his lofty ideals and lofty aspirations even after 500 years. He immediately asked after hearing Han Shuo's words, "First of all, we have to exterminate 2 religions. Follow me, Han Shuo said in a murderous tone as he gazed in the direction of Kasi Empire where the Shrine of Ice was located. Pegasus and Gree the Banshee exchanged glances. They appeared rather excited, as though they were very much looking forward to the business of murder and arson. The fact that these two were imprisoned by the primordious dragon proved that they were used to being arrogant and cruel. It appeared that the centuries of imprisonment did not dull their temperament at all. They were still as bloodthirsty as ever. Hovering in the sky above the Dragon Valley, Han Shuo unfolded his consciousness and sensed for a while. When he discovered that there was nothing else worth staying in the Dragon Valley, he brought the three fellows who had been imprisoned for many years and flew in the direction of Kasi Empire's snowland. The three of them possessed base god strength. As Gree the Banshee's shriek grew louder and louder, many disciples of the Shrine of Ice with weaker strength began to bleed from their ears. Clearly, they had suffered extremely serious injuries. The avalanche continued. Amidst the rumbling noises, several snowy peaks of the Shrine of Ice in the snowy region began to sway. Pegasus flew and landed on the summit of the highest snowy peak. He transformed into his original form of a ferocious manticore and began slaughtering all the disciples of the Shrine of Ice who had encircled him. Pegasus' strength was just too much higher than Pegasus. His claws and fangs moved in rapid succession, tearing apart the disciples of the Shrine of Ice one after another. There was simply no one who could stand a chance against him. Back then, Pegasus and Gree were ferocious existences that struck fear into the hearts of all experts on Profound Continent. Now that the two of them have emerged, I'm afraid that no one on Profound Continent other than you and the Primordious Dragon can restrain them, Ermite Cotton explained to Han Shuo. Ermite Cotton explained to Han Shuo in an indifferent tone as he watched Pegasus and Gree massacre the disciples below. Hee, the Primordious Dragon is a little too merciful. If I were in his shoes, I would have killed them long ago if I disobeyed him, Han Shuo said smilingly. After thinking for a moment, a thought struck him and he said, "Oh, right. I've obtained the dark magic training notebook and your magic staff that you left behind in the forbidden area. Hee, we really are fated to meet. However, I've already given those two items away. I don't think I'll be able to return them to you." Ermite Cotton was rather pleasantly surprised to hear those words from Han Shuo. He gazed deeply into Han Shuo's eyes and sighed. It seems that we are indeed fated to meet. Back then, I thought I was going to die for sure. Therefore, I left these worldly possessions behind, hoping that someone would inherit my cultivation system. Little did I expect that they would fall into your hands. It seems that our meeting this time is truly a fortuitous encounter. Stop. While the two were conversing, a tender shout with astonishing momentum sounded from the highest snowy peak below. Then, a figure suddenly flew out. It was none other than Snow Celestial Tiana, who had once plotted against Han Shuo. Chapter 604. During the trip to Tarag Canyon, Han Shuo and the others each had their own gains. Tiana had obtained a water elemental crystal, which allowed her soul to fuse with the crystal and form a soul of element. After forming a soul of element, Tiana's strength had improved substantially after years of intensive research on water elemental energy. She was now attempting to form a body of element. However, although Tiana's strength had improved, she was still a demigod before she formed a body of element. A mere demigod couldn't even defeat Pegasus and Gree the Banshee, let alone Han Shuo. Dressed in clothes as white as snow, Tiana's expression was cold and detached. Snowflakes danced around her. She let out a loud shout and flew into the air, glaring angrily at Gree the Banshee who was howling shrilly above her head. Without Han Shuo's instructions, Gree the Banshee did not even spare Tiana a glance. She continued to howl shrilly above the snowy peaks with the sound of tearing the sky. Many disciples of the Shrine of Ice with inferior strength gradually couldn't hold on any longer. Some fell into a dazed and dizzy state, while others had their eardrums ruptured. They had sustained rather serious injuries. Pegasus reverted to his original form. Similarly, he ignored Tiana's rebuke and did as he should. Pegasus could be seen rampaging through the snowy peaks, unceremoniously tearing those who dared to resist into shreds. Who the hell are you people? What kind of deep grudge does the Shrine of Ice have against you? Tiana bellowed, glaring furiously at Gree, who was still howling shrilly above her head. Pegasus and Gree turned a blind eye to Tiana's question. They continued to mercilessly attack the disciples of the Shrine of Ice below. Just as Tiana was about to make her move, Han Shuo flew down from the clouds and missed above the snowy peaks, chuckling coldly. Snow Celestial Tiana, long time no see. Do you still recognize me? As soon as Han Shuo descended, he waved his hand to stop Gree and Pegasus' incessant killing. Then, he looked at Tiana and said smilingly. Tiana was all too familiar with Han Shuo. The moment she saw Han Shuo's silhouette appear, she immediately turned pale with fright. She cried out in alarm, "It's you? You didn't die?" Like many others, Tiana believed that the matters confirmed by the Light Pope would never be wrong. Therefore, she had long regarded Han Shuo as a dead man. Now that she suddenly saw Han Shuo again in the Shrine of Ice, she was truly astonished. Hee, do you think that I'm really dead just because the Supreme Pontiff of the Light Church said that he would eliminate me? Han Shuo looked Tiana up and down with a faint smile on his face. Remembering the hatred of the past, he walked step by step towards Tiana in the void. His face gradually grew cold as he stared at Tiana and said icily, "How could I die so easily without killing you despicable bastards?" Han Shuo didn't deliberately display his powerful aura, but Tiana, whose soul had fused with the elemental crystal, could instinctively sense the terrifying power concealed within Han Shuo's body. Tiana couldn't tell what realm Han Shuo had reached, but she clearly knew that Han Shuo was extremely powerful. A sense of fear that she hadn't felt for many years arose in her heart. Even when facing the Saintess of the Church of Light, Tiana didn't have such deep cowardice. This feeling caused her heart to gradually sink. The closer Han Shuo got, the more scared she became. "Are you afraid?" Han Shuo sneered at Tiana. He felt the thrill of revenge as he ridiculed Tiana with words. "No, I'm not." Tiana's tone was somewhat bitter when she said those words. Even she herself noticed the strangeness of her tone. After today, the Shrine of Ice will disappear from Profound Continent. All your years of hard work will be for naught. And you, the old whore who once betrayed me, will disappear along with the Shrine of Ice. As Han Shuo walked towards Tiana, he repeatedly attacked her with words, making her taste the humiliation of being humiliated before her death. "Shut up. I won't slap you." Tiana, as the snow goddess of the Shrine of Ice, finally couldn't endure being called an old whore by Han Shuo to her face. "Pegasus, Gree, get ready to attack. Kill every last one of the Shrine of Ice and destroy their foundation." Han Shuo instructed Pegasus and Gree with a grin. "Don't worry, we will kill every single one of you here." Pegasus, still in his manticore form, cruelly guaranteed with his hands covered in blood. "Very well. You may continue." Han Shuo laughed heartily. Then, he flew towards Tiana and grabbed her. Han Shuo didn't seem to have employed any special martial arts or incantations, but an invisible energy took the form of a whip and lashed at Tiana's body with a loud crack. As an expert who was on the verge of breaking through to Base God realm, Tiana actually had no way to evade Han Shuo's attack. She clearly sensed an invisible energy approaching her body and retreated in a fluster. However, she still couldn't escape the lash of the whip and was struck in an instant. Tiana, who had the image of a noble and beautiful woman, was whipped on the side of her waist by Han Shuo. The mist that had been shrouding Tiana miraculously vanished without a trace, as though it was dispersed by Han Shuo's whip. After the strike, a hole was torn in the snow-white silk robe around Tiana's waist, revealing her fair skin. The red scar on her snow-white skin was extremely obvious. The strength of Han Shuo's whip was extremely precise. It wouldn't kill Tiana in an instant, but it would cause her extreme pain. Especially when the whip tore her clothes, it brought her a sense of unbearable humiliation. Tiana had always been a lofty goddess-like figure in the Shrine of Ice. When had she ever been whipped like a slave? When Han Shuo's attack landed on her body, the pain it brought her was far more than just physical. Interesting, interesting. I'm sure those disciples of your shrine of ice have never seen you like this. Han Shuo chuckled coldly. As soon as he finished speaking, he did not wait for Tiana to fly away. He lashed her body several more times in succession, leaving several bright red whip marks on her body and tearing her snow-white robe once again. Tiana was fleeing, but she couldn't escape. Inexplicably, layers of air walls had appeared in front of her, slowing down her pace of escape. Meanwhile, Han Shuo was sneering as he chased after her unhurriedly. Each and every one of his invisible attacks landed on Tiana's body, leaving one whip mark after another on her body. Her insides were also invaded by a bizarre energy, as though hundreds and thousands of little bugs were gnawing at her body. Below Tiana were the many disciples of the Shrine of Ice. At some point, Pegasus and Gree had all stopped their pursuit of those people. Each and every one of them was stupefied as they looked at the miserable state of the person they most respected above them. They had never imagined that the noblest snow celestial of the Shrine of Ice, Tiana, would be whipped like a slave. You demon. Just kill me. I won't let you off even if I die. Such humiliation made Tiana's eyes red. She was on the verge of breaking down. Chapter 605. You want to die? Han Shuo cast a sidelong glance at Tiana and sneered. It's not that easy. Streaks of invisible whips landed on Tiana's body, inflicting tremendous damage on her body and mind. Tiana could neither escape nor evade Han Shuo's whips. All she could do was endure the double blows on her body and soul in humiliation. Below Tiana were the numerous disciples of the Shrine of Ice. At this moment, they were no longer being massacred by Pegasus and Gree. All of them were looking in agony at Tiana, who was like a caged bird. At this moment, many of the disciples began to pray, praying to the god they worshipped for help. To the disciples of the Shrine of Ice, Snow Celestial Tiana was the most powerful existence in the Shrine of Ice. Yet, such a person was being humiliated without the slightest ability to retaliate. This scene had caused great damage to their souls. If even Snow Celestial Tiana was powerless, what could they do? As disciples of the Shrine of Ice, those who could come to this snowy holy land were all figures of firm faith. When the power they relied on for survival became so vulnerable that it could not withstand a single blow, their reliance on the illusory god suddenly seemed to have been expanded infinitely. Under Han Shuo's whips, Snow Celestial Tiana's snow-white robes were in tatters, her curvaceous body faintly visible. She looked like a slave who had committed a mistake and was being punished by her master. Pegasus and Gree, who had come together with Han Shuo, did not continue their massacre of the Shrine of Ice disciples on the snowy peaks. They looked coldly at Han Shuo, who was slowly whipping Tiana into the air, and waited for further instructions from Han Shuo. At this moment, no one knew who started it, but the helpless Shrine of Ice disciples on the snowy peaks suddenly knelt piously at the same time. They began chanting the incantation used by the Shrine of Ice to call upon the blessing of the Ice Goddess. Their voices went from low to high until they blended into one. All of the Shrine of Ice disciples on the surrounding snowy peaks also temporarily gave up on escaping and joined in on this magnificent feat. Even Tiana couldn't escape. They knew that escaping would only lead to death. With the most devout faith in the Ice Goddess, they prayed, unsure if it would be of any use. The central region of the snowy region was surrounded by frigid wind and snow. The snowy peaks were like long swords piercing the heavens. It was said that the followers of the Shrine of Ice had received instructions from the goddess to choose this location. No one knew if there was any deeper meaning behind it. However, the followers of the Shrine of Ice had always felt that this place would allow them to receive instructions from the goddess closer. In reality, the center of this snowy region was indeed a little special. Back then, that believer had followed the instructions of the snow goddess and had indeed altered the snowy peaks according to her wishes. As prayers reverberated throughout the snowy peak, Gree and Pegasus simply sneered and remained silent. Their faces were filled with ridicule and coldness at the futile efforts of the Shrine of Ice believers. They felt that these people had been scared silly by Han Shuo. Even Ermite Cotton, the base god of darkness, felt that the actions of the Shrine of Ice believers were extremely laughable. He leisurely hovered in the clouds and watched smilingly as Han Shuo humiliated Tiana. However, Han Shuo, whose strength had already reached the realm of divinity, could clearly sense that the elemental energy of water in this snowy region was gradually transforming under the prayers of the Shrine of Ice believers. A force field similar to the domain of divinity was strangely taking shape at the center of the snowy peaks. "You demon! Kill me! I won't let you off even if I die." Tiana's cries were shrill and even carried a hint of sobbing. After being repeatedly humiliated by Han Shuo, Tiana was obviously unable to endure the double torment of her body and soul. Han Shuo paid no attention to Tiana's blood-curdling screams, nor did he whip her again. His two eyes were glistening as he secretly sized up the strange situation of the snowy peaks around him. In his heart, he silently pondered over the abnormality of this sacred land. Suddenly, the elemental energy of water in the center of the snowy peaks began to circulate at high speed. Beams of cold, intense light burst out from the tall, sharp buildings at the top of the snowy peaks. The intense light from the buildings intersected and connected. Frigid air suddenly erupted, causing the surrounding temperature to plummet. This snowy region of the Shrine of Ice was extremely cold to begin with. Now that the temperature had plummeted once again, not only were the most devout believers of the snow goddess unaffected, they even cheered and shouted, "The goddess has shown herself. The snow goddess has heard our prayers." The invaders, including Han Shuo, were all affected by the frigid air. Each and every one of them felt that the temperature was somewhat frighteningly low. Snow Celestial Tiana, who had been imprisoned by Han Shuo's air wall from the very beginning, began to experience strange changes amidst creaking noises. The air wall that Han Shuo deployed there was invaded by waves of frigid air, and was frozen to the point of losing its original strength. Snow Celestial Tiana, who had been beaten black and blue all over, glared fiercely at Han Shuo with clenched teeth. Her half-exposed bosom heaved up and down rapidly. Her voice was as cold as solid ice. "The snow goddess must have felt our cheers. Don't even think about walking out of this snowy region alive today." Holy crap, it can't be that weird, can it? Even the rank 6 scorpion-tailed lion, Pegasus, could sense something strange in the surrounding atmosphere. He couldn't help but cry out in surprise when he heard Tiana's words. "Brian, will the snow goddess really come?" Ermite Cotton asked Han Shuo. He was still rather calm. Ever since he sensed 2 domains of divinity on Han Shuo's body, Ermite Cotton knew that Han Shuo could be considered a true god. He had no idea what was going on with the strange changes happening in this snowy region. However, he believed that Han Shuo should know a little bit about it. Han Shuo nodded with a sullen face and explained, "When the power of faith of a believer can converge in a bizarre manner, and with the help of altars, magical matrices, or sacrificial offerings and other mediums, they can summon their devotees with fanatical faith. As a god, the devotees can indeed sense it. With the help of altars and other mediums, they can even appear for a short period of time in an alien material plane that is infinitely far away." After taking a short pause, Han Shuo surveyed the surroundings. With a gloomy face, he coldly groaned and said, "Judging from the situation, the several frozen mountains in the snowy region have naturally formed magical matrices suitable for the Shrine of Ice to take root. Using a special method, the Shrine of Ice is imbued with the power of faith. If the Ice Goddess possesses profound strength, she can indeed hear the thoughts of the believers here." "What do we do?" Pegasus, who had just been wantonly slaughtering, cried out in panic. He had a clear understanding of his own strength. Any god that appeared was not something he could deal with. He had finally walked out of the primordious dragon's boundary with great difficulty. He did not want to go back or be killed. "What are you panicking about?" Han Shuo shot a cold glance at Pegasus before saying indifferently, "Any god, as long as they don't truly cross the material plane distance and arrive with both their divine body and divine soul, can't display their full strength. They can't display much strength at all by relying on mediums, using objects to reform their bodies, or using their devotees to appear. No matter how powerful the snow goddess is, she will still be bound by the laws of the universe when she arrives through such means. What an arrogant fellow. The snow goddess has countless devotees in every material plane. As a powerful god from ancient times, even if she only uses 1% of her strength, she will still kill all of you. Tiana hurriedly changed into a new robe. She gnashed her teeth and glared at Han Shuo with hatred as she spoke sarcastically. Contrary to Tiana's expectations, Han Shuo did not refute, but rather calmly admitted this fact. That's right. If the snow goddess really does come personally, even if she uses that method to descend, it will still be difficult for us to escape death. While Tiana was astonished and puzzled, Han Shuo laughed coldly in a loud voice. He mocked, however, "Do you really think that the snow goddess will personally come to deal with me for such trivial matters? The snow goddess has countless devotees in every material plane. If she personally takes action for everything, wouldn't she be overworked to death? We are the most devout devotees of the snow goddess. The snow goddess will definitely take pity on us. This is also her domain. She will never allow anyone to destroy it." Tiana felt that Han Shuo's words made sense, but she still stubbornly defended herself. Han Shuo sneered disdainfully and did not continue to defend himself. There was another reason he did not tell Tiana. Gods would only use mediums to send their souls to another material plane to fight for their devotees. That would require them to bear many additional risks and would even consume some of their divine energy. Generally, they would not do so unless they had no other choice. The snow goddess was different from the spider goddess Rose. As far as Han Shuo knew, the snow goddess was an overgod, and an incomparably powerful one at that. There was no way she would personally take action just for the sake of a small number of devotees on a tiny, profound continent. As a god himself, Han Shuo knew that those gods didn't really care about their worshippers. They would only take the items that the worshippers used to provide them with the power of faith. Han Shuo decided that he wouldn't personally take action over such a trivial matter. It was precisely because of this judgment that Han Shuo did not immediately flee in panic when he saw the abnormal changes occurring in this snowy region. Instead, he decided to observe the situation first before making a decision. "Lord Brian, what should we do?" Gree the Banshee asked Han Shuo with a trembling voice. Han Shuo bunched his brows and hesitated for a moment. He knew that no matter what level of god the snow goddess dispatched, Pegasus and his party would have no chance of resisting. "You guys leave for now and wait at the rear for a while. I would like to meet those from the Shrine of Ice." Han Shuo shot a glance at the three and nodded, indicating that they should not make useless sacrifices. Pegasus and Gree felt as though they had been granted amnesty after hearing those words from Han Shuo. They hastily retreated into the distance. Ermite Cotton was the only one who gave Han Shuo a deep look and said, "Be careful. Don't worry, I'll be fine." Han Shuo could tell that Ermite Cotton was genuinely concerned about him. Unlike Pegasus and Gree, Han Shuo put on a faint smile and put on a gentle attitude. Ermite Cotton nodded and said no more. He then flew in the direction Pegasus and Gree had left. Chapter 606. As soon as Ermite Cotton left, Han Shuo immediately focused all of his attention on the intersecting cold lights atop the icy peaks. The reason the Shrine of Ice had established its base in such a place was because of the unique topography of this place, where it was the easiest to gather cold air. In addition to the deliberate arrangement of the Shrine of Ice's believers, the few icy peaks formed bizarre magical matrices under the ice goddess instructions. Not only did they have the ability to gather cold air, they could also form an altar to receive the energy bestowed by the ice goddess. On Profound Continent, other than the Primordius Dragon, Han Shuo really did not have to worry about anyone. However, it was obvious that Tiana was not the main character in the current situation. The fact that these few icy peaks were able to produce such bizarre transformations was sufficient proof that the direct participants in this battle were from other high-level material planes. Han Shuo could look down on the experts of Profound Continent, but he had long learned from Bichimos how terrifying the gods of high-level material planes were. Furthermore, he had learned from the memories of the skeletal staff's original owner just how terrifying the ice goddess was. Although he had his own speculations, he dared not lower his guard. Ever since the ice peaks had transformed and the shackles on her were lifted, it was as though Tiana had obtained infinite power. Her bright eyes were sizing up Han Shuo like a viper, as though waiting to see how Han Shuo would die. The snowy peaks were filled with dense cold air. Rays of cold lights intersected with each other. The water elemental energy of the entire snowland had been transformed into an aura of extreme cold. Snow suddenly filled the snowland without anyone noticing. Every snowflake seemed to carry the energy of extreme cold. Han Shuo did not move a muscle. He coldly observed the situation around him, paying close attention to Snow Celestial Tiana, who was gnashing her teeth and glaring at him. Han Shuo had a premonition that the gods from another material plane would descend upon this material plane through Tiana, just like how Spider Goddess Rose had used Adele as a medium to convey a message to Han Shuo. However, Han Shuo knew that the situation this time was different from Adele's, because no matter how one looked at it, the scale of the church that Adele organized was far inferior to the Shrine of Ice. And this time, the Shrine of Ice had thousands of disciples praying together. The energy formed from the call was sufficient for the gods from another material plane to appear by relying on the medium. "You will die." Looking at Snow Celestial Tiana, who was glaring at him with extreme hatred, yet did not understand the actual situation, Han Shuo actually smiled and said such a thing. "Hee, you're the one who's going to die. What are you afraid?" "You must be afraid, but it's useless to be afraid. You'll definitely die." Tiana tasted an unforgettable humiliation at the hands of Han Shuo. Her state of mind, which had been calm for many years, was completely thrown into chaos. She was no longer as graceful and elegant as before. She became somewhat hysterical. "Can you feel it? Was this a change in the elemental energies in the surroundings?" Han Shuo's expression was calm as he looked at Tiana and slowly asked, "What about the abnormalities of the prayers?" "What?" Tiana stared blankly for a moment, then said irritably, "Don't try to mystify me. You must die today." "What a pitiful fellow. Do you think it's so easy for a god to appear on another material plane?" Han Shuo sneered and pointed at the disciples of the Shrine of Ice on the snowy peaks beneath his feet. He said mockingly, "Look around you. Look at those devout believers. What kind of end have these thousands of believers gotten in exchange for using their fanatical faith in the Ice Goddess?" Tiana followed his gaze and suddenly discovered that all the believers who were kneeling on the ground and praying for the Ice Goddess' help were bleeding from all 7 orifices. They were shockingly lifeless. No matter how strong Tiana was, she suddenly screamed when she saw the miserable deaths of thousands of devout believers. She yelled somewhat crazily, "How could this be? How could this be? It's you. You must be the one who killed them." Tiana didn't know if it was because she couldn't believe the truth, or because her trust in the Ice Goddess had reached the point of fanaticism. She pointed at Han Shuo venomously, bared her fangs and brandished her claws, yelling and screaming like a mad vixen. Han Shuo shook his head. He knew that Tiana was done for. Even if she was lucky enough to survive today, it would be difficult for her to walk out from the shadow of today's events. It was at this moment that the strong lights on the snowy peaks suddenly changed direction and shot at Snow Celestial Tiana, who was hovering in midair. An extremely mournful and miserable howl suddenly sounded from Snow Celestial Tiana's mouth. Her voice was mournful and horrifying, as if she was a female ghost that had returned to life. Tiana's body, under the simultaneous shooting of several beams of cold light, was like a small sun that shone brilliantly. An enormous aura of absolute chilliness gradually emanated from Tiana's radiant body. In a split second, the elemental energies that filled the snowy region vanished without a trace. Only the elements of water gathered more and more, and the thick snowflakes below rapidly turned into ice. This was the sign of the formation of the domain of divinity. When he saw this, Han Shuo was certain that Snow Celestial Tiana was truly done for. As he had expected, the person who had come had indeed adopted the most effective method. He had forcibly occupied Snow Celestial Tiana's body, and her soul had already been forcibly erased. The strong lights shone on Tiana's body, but for a moment, they were all hidden within her body. It was as if her body had completely absorbed them. When the light dissipated, Tiana was still standing in her original spot, unscathed. It was just that her entire person was completely different. An ice-cold, emotionless expression had replaced Tiana's frenzied and venomous gaze. Those eyes were still Tiana's, but the meaning within them had undergone an earth-shattering change. Who are you? How dare you challenge the coercion of our ice goddess? A cold, indifferent male voice came from Tiana's mouth. It gave Han Shuo a strange feeling of awkwardness. From the moment this male voice came from her mouth, Han Shuo knew that Tiana was dead. The person who had occupied her body was definitely an emissary who would uphold the dignity of the ice goddess. Don't care who I am. In short, the shrine of ice on Profound Continent was indeed destroyed by my hands. Han Shuo replied in the same cold, indifferent voice as he sized up the newcomer with rapt attention. He unfolded his consciousness, trying to figure out just how much strength this person possessed. Unfathomable. This was Han Shuo's evaluation of this person after probing with his consciousness. The person who had forcibly occupied Tiana's soul nodded his head lightly and coldly said, "Very well then. Since the foundation of this place has been destroyed by you, then no matter what, you will die." These words were like a judgment, as though killing Han Shuo was a matter of course, no different from crushing an ant to death. As soon as these words were uttered, the person draped in Tiana's body charged straight at Han Shuo. Without any fancy movements, he lightly and skillfully punched out. All of a sudden, the water element in his domain of divinity in the entire snowfield instantly poured into his body. The bone-chilling temperature in the surroundings instantly returned to normal. It was as though spring had suddenly returned to the warmth of spring and flowers were blooming. Han Shuo felt a chill in his heart. He could clearly sense that the water element energy shrouding the several icy peaks had all been concentrated in this one punch. The divine energy contained within the punch was so frigid that it affected Han Shuo's body and senses, giving him a feeling of helplessness where there was no room for retreat. Han Shuo's consciousness was unable to determine what realm this person was in. However, with this punch, the domain of divinity of water had undergone such a huge change. Immediately, Han Shuo was certain that this person had surpassed the realm of low god. Without knowing how strong this person was, Han Shuo did not dare to rashly block this attack. All of a sudden, his body, mind, and spirit underwent a transformation at the same time. Han Shuo was like a pool of stagnant water. There was not the slightest ripple in his heart. Han Shuo adjusted his body transformation, mind transformation, and consciousness transformation to a tranquil state. It was as though he could strangely sense the trajectory of this punch and the energy contained within it. By the time that person's punch landed, Han Shuo's figure had already reappeared 1,000 meters away. A clap of thunder boomed in the sky where Han Shuo's punch landed. Several snowy peaks that had just thawed suddenly shook violently. Huge rocks tumbled down. That person let out a soft cry of surprise, as though he did not expect that Han Shuo would be able to evade his attack. He appeared extremely astonished. Han Shuo, who was already 1,000 meters away, sensed the power of that person's punch with his tranquil and unperturbed mind. After quickly weighing the situation, Han Shuo realized that this person was definitely a mid-god. However, because his divine body could not descend to this material plane, the power that Tiana, the medium, could generate was limited. It was simply not enough to kill him. With this conclusion in mind, Han Shuo let out a mischievous sneer. His body of 3 souls suddenly shook. 2 identical copies of Han Shuo appeared. That person cried out in surprise again. He was somewhat astonished by what he saw. His tranquil eyes were now a little strange. Without waiting for him to ask or attack again, Han Shuo's 3 bodies moved simultaneously and rapidly shot towards him from 3 different directions. Han Shuo deployed 2 domains of divinity at the same time. The element of death and edict of destruction were forcibly squeezed into his domain of divinity. His avatars swayed continuously, their corporeal forms indistinguishable. Ever since Han Shuo cultivated 3 bodies, He had never attacked a single person with all his strength. Although this mid-god who descended through Tiana's body could only exert a small portion of his strength, he was still a mid-god. There was an insurmountable gap between a low god and a mid-god. Han Shuo had no choice but to give it his all. Bang, 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 bang. Halfway through, the three Han Shuos simultaneously hit a wall. They were forcibly blocked by an invisible barrier. Han Shuo immediately realized that the person's domain of divinity was more powerful than he had imagined because his cultivation realm was higher than his. Having more people doesn't necessarily mean you'll gain the upper hand. That person coldly said. He threw another punch at Han Shuo's avatar of destruction. At this moment, when Han Shuo's three bodies charged over, they were all blocked by the ice-cold barrier. Moreover, they were all invaded by the frigid air. Han Shuo retreated, while expelling the frigid air from his body. The situation had become extremely dangerous. Chapter 607. Han Shuo's heart remained unmoved as he watched the man's fist fly towards him, and the cold air enter his three bodies at the same time. He calmly searched for a solution. The three bodies retreated at the same time and spread out in three different directions. The distance between them grew longer and longer. Just as the fist that seemed to have condensed the coldness of the entire winter was about to hit Han Shuo's avatar of destruction, Han Shuo suddenly had an idea. His avatar of death rapidly retreated, distancing itself from the icy barrier in the blink of an eye. Han Shuo's body retreated and whooshed towards the person from behind. The space ring on his finger glowed faintly and three round pearls shot towards the person occupying Tiana's soul at lightning speed. Rumble. An earth-shattering explosion suddenly came from the three beads. The ice barrier formed by that person was suddenly hit by the violent explosion and was instantly torn into pieces. The three pearls of annihilation exploded at the same time, forming a shockwave that shattered the person's icy barrier. The soul piercers hidden within the pearls of annihilation shot invisibly and densely towards the person who was preparing to attack Han Shuo's avatar of destruction. Demonic arts were different from any elemental or edictal force in this world. Even this mid-god was at a loss as to what to do. He was unable to completely evade the attack of the densely packed soul piercers and was struck by a few of them. The soul piercers were extremely vicious. Once they entered the opponent's body, they would immediately attack the opponent's soul. They were like unforgiving evil spirits that would not give the opponent any time to breathe. Huh! The person exclaimed softly for the third time. He was evidently surprised by Han Shuo's flashy attacks. As soon as the soul piercers entered his body, he immediately felt the threat that came from his soul. He forcibly stopped the punch that was supposed to be aimed at Han Shuo and focused all his energy on eliminating the threat of the soul piercers. The soul piercers were absolutely lethal to ordinary experts. If one's strength was insufficient, the soul piercers might even destroy one's soul under the corrosion of the soul piercers. However, from his previous experience in the Abyss realm, he knew that the soul of a god-rank expert was simply too powerful. A soul that had fused with the elements was not something that the soul piercers could destroy. The stronger the soul, the higher the degree of fusion with the elements, and the shorter the time needed to remove the soul piercers. Han Shuo understood this principle. When he saw that the person had given up on attacking his avatar of destruction and was instead retreating, the three avatars once again made their move at the same time, attacking the person who was clearing the soul piercer's threat. Despicable! That person shouted with a cold expression. He did not dare to directly face the attacks of the three Han Shuo and hurriedly retreated. Hee, despicable? This is a strategy. What do you know? You are the despicable one. You are a mid-god who has lived for God knows how many years. You came here to kill me, a puny low god. You even absorbed the faith power of all the believers here and forcibly took over the body of the most devout believer. Are you not despicable? That's why you don't deserve to call others despicable. When the three Han Shuos flew towards him, all three mouths mocked him at the same time. Their words came one after another, leaving the man speechless. In the time it took for the three avatars to speak, Han Shuo's three avatars had arrived by his side. Without the slightest hesitation, the Avatar of Destruction and Han Shuo were the main attackers, while the Avatar of Death constantly released necromancy magic as support. One boundary after another fell on his body, making it impossible for him to exert his full strength. Having crossed the distance between two material planes to come here, he could only exert a small portion of his strength through Tiana's body. Now that his soul had been pierced by the Soul Piercers, he was constantly harassed by necromancy magic, and he had to face the joint attacks of the other two Han Shuas. He was weary of dealing with them. Han Shuo had never been one to play by the rules. He liked to take advantage of the moment when others were at their most helpless to deliver a head-on blow. This time was obviously no exception. The three Han Shuas stared at the overwhelmed person in the center and launched a series of attacks. 3 types of demonic arts, necromancy boundaries, and edict of destruction were unleashed from the 3 Han Shua's bodies one after another, landing on that person. The person who had appeared calm and indifferent from the moment he first appeared finally showed signs of fatigue. His 2 hands constantly intertwined to form layers of icy barriers. He seemed to be losing strength. His soul could not appear for too long in a foreign material plane using a medium. Moreover, the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. This was something Han Shuo was well aware of after he obtained some memories of the skeletal staff's original owner. Seeing that he was exhausted, Han Shuo's attacks became even more urgent. He didn't give the person any chance to retaliate. He was planning to use this opportunity to exhaust all of the person's divine power. The person was extremely aggrieved. He had truly never seen such a despicable and merciless attack method as Han Shuo's. If not for the strange power disrupting his soul, he wouldn't be in such a passive position. Unfortunately, after being ambushed by Han Shuo, he had no time left. He could only watch helplessly as he became a target, with absolutely no chance to retaliate. What frustrated him even more was Han Shuo's incessant mocking, insulting, and sneering. 3 Han Shuos, 3 mouths. His advantage in numbers was not only reflected in his attack methods, but was also used by him to disrupt his enemy's mind. While the 3 mouths were attacking, they would constantly greet the person's family and ancestors, ridicule the person's incompetence, describe the person's appearance after death, and repeatedly attack the person's mind. Most people wouldn't be able to withstand the pain of such verbal attacks. Because his demonic arts had reached the 9 changes realm, his body, mind, and consciousness had reached a state of absolute calmness. Therefore, his mind was extremely calm when he spoke those words. His verbal attacks were even in a variety of styles, annoying the person to no end and making him more and more irritable. "Shut up!" the person roared. He stared at Han Shuo in pain and shouted, "You are also a low god. How can you be so despicable?" The 3 Han Shuos were startled. After a moment of silence, even more vicious words came from the mouths of the 3 mouths, completely ignoring the person's angry shouts. It would be a waste not to use this advantage of having 3 mouths more than you. "You're really an idiot." Han Shuo sneered in his mind. He could tell from the person's performance that his tactics were truly effective. Bang, bang, bang. In line with Han Shuo's incessant verbal attacks, the 3 of them joined forces and landed one after another on the ice barrier deployed by the person who had taken defensive measures. All of a sudden, he forcibly took over Tiana's body and fiercely emitted a strong light. Tiana's body rapidly shrunk within the glaring light, as though all the energy in her body was being absorbed by her bones. Boom! The sound of an explosion came from Tiana's body. Hundreds of icy arrows whizzed in all directions, landing on the 3 Han Shuos who were caught off guard. The hundreds of icy arrows came at an extremely fast and ferocious speed. They contained an extremely frightening amount of divine energy. Because the 3 Han Shuos were closing in and surrounding him, the hundreds of icy arrows almost all landed on the 3 Han Shuos' bodies, causing varying degrees of damage to all 3 of them. In an instant, all 3 of Han Shuo's bodies simultaneously felt a bone-piercing chill. Not only did that chill affect all 3 Han Shuo's bodies, it even attacked their souls. It was as though it wanted to freeze the 3 Han Shuos to death. Crunch, crunch, Terrifying sounds of ice freezing came from all three Han Shua's bodies at the same time. Solid ice covered his body in an instant, making him look like three crystalline ice sculptures. His face maintained expressions of mockery, cursing, and sneering respectively. It was an extremely bizarre sight. Tiana's body became a bloody skeleton after the strong light burst out. It was as though all her flesh and skin had been absorbed by her bones. It was an extremely horrifying sight. A pair of cold, emotionless eyes stared viciously at the three Han Shuas. The person said irritably, "I've had enough of your voice. Shut your mouth forever." He raised his hand and three icicles the size of broadswords suddenly appeared out of thin air. They stabbed towards the three Han Shuas at lightning speed, piercing through the solid ice on Han Shua's body and piercing straight through his chest. Huff, huff, huff. The person's deformed body panted heavily. It seemed that releasing three icicles to attack Han Shua had consumed too much of his divine energy. It was a little too much for him to bear. What the hell is this thing? How can it have three bodies? And a way of using energy whose origin I can't tell. This guy is really weird. The person muttered to himself while staring at Han Shua while panting heavily. He appeared to be extremely puzzled. Fortunately, he's about to be finished. This mission is about to be completed. It's just that he's consumed a lot of his divine energy. He didn't gain any advantage on this trip. The person continued to mutter in a low voice. The remaining flesh and blood on his bloody skeletal body slowly froze. He seemed to be panting to recover his divine energy and then organize his energy to deliver a fatal blow to Han Shua's soul. All three of Han Shua's bodies were hit by the frigid arrow. The extraordinarily powerful cold energy instantly froze his limbs. Soon after, three icicles attacked again, piercing through all three of Han Shua's bodies and causing all three of them to suffer varying degrees of injuries. However, although Han Shua's body was frozen, his consciousness was still there and his mind was still calm. If it were any other god, it would be very difficult for them to organize their energy to counterattack after suffering such a series of attacks. After all, the divine body was the foundation of one's body. It would be very difficult for one to move after suffering such heavy injuries. However, none of Han Shua's three bodies were normal. His avatar of destruction was transformed from the demon's lair edge, his avatar of death was transformed from the skeletal staff, and his avatar of demonic arts was the physical body of his main body. Moreover, he possessed an almost undying body. How could an ordinary body compare to his? Therefore, although all three of Han Shua's bodies were frozen, Han Shua didn't lose the ability to counterattack at all. Just when that person thought that Han Shua was at his wit's end and was about to silently recover his divine energy to deliver a final attack on Han Shua's soul, he heard a creaking sound coming from Han Shua's avatar of destruction. That person was startled and hastily turned his head to look. Then, he suddenly cried out in surprise. He was shocked by what he saw. Chapter 608. You, what are you? That person's ice-cold voice trembled as he looked at Han Shua, who had suddenly transformed into a long sword. He had followed the ice goddess on expeditions on various planes of existence for many years. He had seen all kinds of people and races, but he had never seen anything as shocking as this scene before. A human who had just attacked him had suddenly transformed into a long sword. This was completely beyond his understanding of the various energies. An extremely preposterous feeling welled up in his heart. Not only humans, but even gods would be fearful of the unknown. Therefore, when he discovered that Han Shua had transformed into a long sword, he, who hadn't been nervous since he descended to this plane of existence, was truly a little afraid. That was why his voice trembled a little. Creak, creak. Han Shua, who had transformed into the demon's lair edge, twisted a few times and shattered the solid ice. This made that person even more terrified. Why do you care what I am? Do you think that you can trap me with just these solid ice? Han Shua sneered in the form of the demon's lair edge. His voice was filled with ridicule. Blood-colored light flickered repeatedly on the blade, shattering the ice that had frozen him and flying out. The demon's lair edge had been forged by Han Shuo to be incomparably sharp. It had just absorbed the destructive energy of a few 100,000 orcs a few days ago. Due to its unique composition, it was extremely difficult to imprison. Blood-colored light glistened as the demon's lair edge shot towards Han Shuo's frozen body. With a crisp clang, the ice that had frozen Han Shuo's body completely shattered. Han Shuo grinned as he sized up that person. He extended his hand, and the demon's lair edge landed in his palm. Pointing at his avatar of death in the distance, Han Shuo smilingly said, "Look at that body. Isn't it also very peculiar?" That person was shocked by Han Shuo's successive methods. When he turned his head to look, he discovered that the third Han Shuo had turned into a skeletal staff. He felt a chill in his heart. He really didn't know what kind of monster Han Shuo was. "You? What race are you?" The man who was trembling in fear pointed at Han Shuo and cried out in alarm. Han Shuo knew that the person was scared. After such a series of shocks, the fear of the unknown had deeply affected him. In addition, he hadn't gathered his divine energy for the time being. He immediately wanted to retreat. Han Shuo, who was sizing him up, saw that the divine light in the person's eyes was gradually dissipating. He snorted coldly and stabbed at the person with the demon's lair edge. The demon's lair edge pierced through the person's skull. The demon's lair edge's tens of thousands of negative energy of malicious souls and the divine energy formed from the edict of destruction were unleashed at the same time. He spread his hand over Pegasus' head and said in a sinister tone, "What? Do you want to kill me while I'm seriously injured?" "I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare." Pegasus was extremely frightened. He hastily knelt before Han Shuo. He was so frightened that he didn't even dare to move. "No matter how heavily injured I am, killing you is as easy as flipping my palm. Don't try to show off your little tricks in front of me. In the face of absolute power, you'd better put away your little tricks as soon as possible," Han Shuo said unhurriedly with a mischievous smile as he looked at Pegasus. "I wouldn't dare. I really wouldn't dare." When Pegasus saw the ground littered with corpses, he thought that all of them were killed by Han Shuo. He was truly afraid that Han Shuo would immediately finish him off. He was bitterly begging for Han Shuo's forgiveness. "It seems like people like you need to be restrained a little. Otherwise, I reckon you won't be too honest." Han Shuo grinned nastily. A drop of blood spurted out from his index finger. He infused it with some divine energy and sealed it in Pegasus' brain. "If you don't have enough strength, you better not have any thoughts of resisting. Otherwise, your brain will explode with a single thought of mine." Hee. Han Shuo was all smiles as he looked at the trembling Pegasus. His attitude was amiable. "Well, Gree, if you think you can escape, you can give it a try." Han Shuo removed his big hand from Pegasus' head and shot a cold glance at Gree, who was timidly trying to escape in the distance. "My lord, you misunderstand. I'm not trying to escape." Gree forced a smile and explained with a bitter face. "You are a smart person. You should know what to do. Just come here obediently." Han Shuo looked at Gree with an unruffled smile and said unhurriedly, "Understood." Gree heaved a sigh and thought to herself, "Why am I so unlucky to run into such a demon? Sigh, I'm done for this time." With a smile on her face, Gree obediently walked up to Han Shuo, extended her head in front of Han Shuo, and said, "My lord, please apply the seal." That's more like it." Han Shuo smiled evilly and applied the same seal on Gree. "What about me, Brian?" Ermite Cotton walked up to Han Shuo and asked with a smile, "What are you talking about? How can I treat you like that?" Han Shuo pretended to be angry. He glared at Ermite Cotton and said sincerely, "You are different from them. I can tell who is sincere and who is pretending." Pegasus and Gree both wore bitter faces. They exchanged glances and sighed inwardly at the same time. They thought to themselves, "How unlucky I am. I really don't have a chance to escape anymore." Chapter 609. After taking care of Pegasus and Gree, Han Shuo assigned them a mission: carry away all the valuables of the Shrine of Ice. Pegasus and Gree were old monsters who had lived for God knows how many years. They had a discerning eye for treasures. After planting a seal in their minds, Han Shua had their lives in his hands. He wasn't afraid that they would play any tricks. The two were truly afraid of Han Shua. They flew around several icy mountains with bitter faces, searching for anything valuable for Han Shua. If they hadn't met Han Shua, the two would have been characters that no one on Profound Continent would have dared to provoke. As the saying goes, evil people will only be tormented by evil people. They deserved it. After all, it was Han Shua who said that he was seriously injured that the two began to harbor evil thoughts. As an expert who founded the Lancelot Empire, Ermite Cotton knew that Han Shua's goal was to unify the entire Profound Continent. Therefore, after learning that Han Shua's goal was to unify the entire Profound Continent, Ermite Cotton had truly started to treat Han Shua as one of his own. Han Shua had always maintained the proper respect for Ermite Cotton. He did not give Han Shua any face like how he treated Pegasus and Gree. While the two dejectedly worked on Han Shua's behalf, Han Shua and Ermite Cotton were chatting with a smile on their faces, as though they were two friends despite the difference in age. You mentioned that a god of the Shrine of Ice has descended. How strong is that person? Ermite Cotton was extremely curious about the Shrine of Ice. He had stayed on Profound Continent for a very long time and had long learned of how powerful the Shrine of Ice was. It's a mid-god. He's very powerful. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't display his full strength and that I managed to sneak attack him, I'm afraid that you wouldn't be able to see me today, Han Shua explained smilingly. I didn't expect that he would be a mid-god. He is indeed terrifying, Ermite Cotton said with some lingering fear. Ermite Cotton felt some lingering fear in his heart. He was aware of the hierarchy of gods and understood what a difference of one level meant. He underestimated the enemy. Serves him right, Han Shua said smilingly. It can be said that you have destroyed the Shrine of Ice's foundation on Profound Continent. They definitely won't let this matter rest. Have you thought of how you are going to deal with them if they were to cross material planes? After all, Ermite Cotton had lived for many years. There were some things he knew. Han Shua of the Shrine of Ice had long thought of this problem. Han Shua had long thought of this problem. He knew that it wasn't impossible for him to send of gods of higher material planes to cross planes through interplanar transportation matrices. This time, it was because that mid-god's soul had used Tiana as a medium to descend that Han Shua managed to injure his soul and force him to retreat. If that mid-god had truly used the interplanar transportation matrix to cross dimensions, Han Shua knew that with his current strength, he would have no chance of victory. I haven't thought about it yet. This is indeed a headache. After a long while, Han Shua shook his head and sighed helplessly. Sigh, it seems that we can only take it one step at a time. I hope he won't really cross planes to come here. Ermite Cotton was also very helpless. His strength was limited, and he couldn't help Han Shua even if he wanted to. All he could do was comfort Han Shua verbally. It's all right, there's always a way, Han Shua said while pretending to be relaxed. However, his heart was getting heavier and heavier. He understood that on Profound Continent, other than the Primordius Dragon who acted as his protector, there really wasn't anyone who could threaten him. Han Shua wasn't even afraid of the Primordius Dragon. However, there were many experts on other material planes. If even a mid-god were to descend, Han Shua wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. Previously, Han Shua had offended Spider Goddess Rose, and now he had injured that mid-god of the Shrine of Ice. This enmity had been sown. Perhaps one day they would meet again. The pressure on Han Shua made him feel rather heavy. What should we do next? Should we make another trip to the sacred mountain of the Church of Light? Ermite Cotton couldn't help but ask as he knew about Han Shua's plan. After hesitating for a moment, Han Shua shook his head, forced a smile, and said, "Let's wait for a while. I've sustained some injuries this time. The Church of Light might have another battle on the sacred mountain. If I were to face the Shrine of Ice again, I really don't have the confidence to withstand it. Let's go back first. When I recover from my injuries, I will come back and wipe out the Church of Light in one fell swoop. I need to make good use of this period of time to think about how to deal with future crises." All right, I really do miss the Lancelot Empire. Hee hee, I was imprisoned by the primordious dragon for 500 years. I wonder how many things have happened in the Lancelot Empire during these 500 years. I wonder if the citizens and the imperial family of the Lancelot Empire will still remember me? Whenever Ermite Cotton mentioned the Lancelot Empire that he had founded, he would feel a sense of gratification and satisfaction. This was also the reason why he treated Han Shuo so sincerely and amicably after learning that Han Shuo was carrying out his unfinished business. To Ermite Cotton, Han Shuo, who hailed from Lancelot Empire, was equivalent to one of his people. Moreover, Han Shuo was an expert who had the strength to contribute to the empire. The two shared common interests. By the time they arrived at the Cemetery of Death, he was basically in good condition. Therefore, he did not enter the Cemetery of Death, but instead brought Ermite Cotton and the other two to the Valley of Sunshine. This time, Han Shuo did not stay in the Valley of Sunshine for long. He found Jasper and the others and told them to stay in the Valley of Sunshine to familiarize themselves with the new world known as Profound Continent. After chatting with Trunks for a while, he arrived at Austin City with Ermite Cotton and the other two. Ermite Cotton had been away from Lancelot Empire for far too long. He really missed Lancelot. In order not to cause a commotion in Lancelot Empire, Han Shuo did not reveal Ermite Cotton's identity to anyone. To Ermite Cotton, he really didn't care about such an empty reputation. He had obtained everything he needed 500 years ago. He really didn't care about being worshipped like a god in Lancelot Empire. The reason why Han Shuo wanted to return to Austin City was to let Ermite Cotton relive his old days. On the other hand, Han Shuo wanted to personally greet Lawrence and come up with a plan to launch an all-out attack on other countries. After arriving at Austin City, Pegasus and Gree were arranged by Han Shuo to join the Dark Mantle. They became the two most terrifying trump cards of the Dark Mantle and were in charge of handling the most dangerous and difficult missions of the Dark Mantle. Both of them possessed base god strengths. With them in the Dark Mantle, Lancelot Empire would be absolutely safe in handling some of the shady affairs. For example, when two armies were engaged in battle, they could get rid of the Empire's commanders or deploy powerful magical matrices to turn the tide of the battle. It was impossible for Han Shuo to do all these things by himself. With them around, Han Shuo could save a lot of effort. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Han Shuo wouldn't summon the experts of the Abyss Realm. After all, the creatures of the Abyss Realm were unlike the humans on Profound Continent. If the experts of the Abyss Realm were to arrive on Profound Continent, it would cause unimaginable panic to the people of Profound Continent. Han Shuo did not wish to become the enemy of the entire Profound Continent. Therefore, he would never mobilize the forces of the Abyss Realm unless absolutely necessary. However, with Han Shuo's current strength and the formidable experts he had under his command, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to help Lancelot Empire unify Profound Continent, even if he didn't utilize the experts of the Abyss Realm. After making arrangements for Pegasus and Gree, Ermite Cotton was arranging the large number of items he obtained from the Shrine of Ice. It was at this moment that the members of the Calamity Church, who he had not seen for a long time, traveled thousands of miles to pay their respects to Han Shuo. Chapter 6:10. The visitors were Wolf, whom Han Shuo was very familiar with, and Bert Zeely, the former Duke of Ballet Duchy. After Ballet Duchy was annexed by Bretel City, Bert Zeely disappeared without a trace. It was said that this evil summoner had returned to the Calamity Church. The two went straight to Han Shuo's mansion in Austin City. After waiting for Han Shuo for a long time, they finally saw Han Shuo, who had just returned from Buzzed Merchant Guild's Phoebe's place. When they met, the two were unprecedentedly respectful. As soon as they arrived, they kowtowed to Han Shuo, giving Han Shuo quite a fright. "What are you two doing?" Han Shuo was very astonished. From the way the two kowtowed to him, Han Shuo discovered that the two seemed to regard him as an elder of the Calamity Church. This made Han Shuo feel rather peculiar. "Lord Brian, the two of us have come under orders to invite you. We hope that you will make an official trip to the Calamity Church's headquarters with us," Wolf said in a deferential manner. "Oh, Han Shua let out a soft cry of surprise and asked puzzledly, "Why are you inviting me to the Calamity Church?" The mysterious Calamity Church had never publicly announced the location of its headquarters. Those countries and religions hostile to the Calamity Church had racked their brains to no avail to find the location of the Calamity Church's headquarters. Han Shua did not expect that Wolf and Bert Zeely would so solemnly extend an invitation to him. This made Han Shua rather flattered. "Lord Brian, your magnificent feat outside South Border City and the destruction of the Shrine of Ice have made His Holiness aware of your return. His Holiness has instructed us to do our utmost to invite you to the Calamity Church. He has important matters to discuss with you. He hopes that Lord Brian will not refuse." When Wolf said those words, his eyes were filled with unconcealable reverence. It appeared that Han Shua's thunderous return to Profound Continent had indeed shocked the Calamity Church. "Why must it be me who goes to the Calamity Church? If your Pope is sincere, he should personally come to see me." With Han Shua's current strength, there weren't many on the entire Profound Continent that could catch his eye. The Calamity Church was no exception. Therefore, Han Shua had the audacity to make such a claim. Perhaps Wolf had been solemnly instructed before he came, but when Han Shua said these words, he did not get angry. Instead, he smiled bitterly and explained, 5 years ago, His Holiness the Pope was prepared to personally come and have a chat with you. This time, when he heard of your news, he was no exception. He really was prepared to personally come. Then why didn't he come over? Why did he insist on me going over?" Han Shua frowned and asked in a deep voice. With Han Shua's current strength, he wasn't afraid of the Calamity Church playing dirty tricks behind his back. Even if his 2 avatars were injured, Han Shua was confident that he could protect himself. It was just that he had been busy with the affairs of Lancelot Empire for the past few days and had no intention of going out for the time being. Before His Holiness the Pope decided to come over, he used the altar to communicate with the God of Faith. As we are of low status, we don't know the specifics. However, when His Holiness the Pope came over, he said that the God of the Calamity Church had personally spoken and solemnly invited you to make a trip to the Calamity Church's headquarters. Only by using the altar at the headquarters can you communicate with the God of Faith, Wolf explained respectfully. When these words were spoken, Han Shua's heart jolted as he thought of a few possibilities. For the past few days, Han Shua had been worrying about the Shrine of Ice and Spider Goddess Rose. He clearly understood that whether it was Spider Goddess Rose or the Shrine of Ice, they weren't forces that he could deal with alone. Once they crossed over, Han Shua knew that he wouldn't have much of a chance of victory. He had a clear understanding of his own strength and understood that he wouldn't be able to contend against either side in a short period of time. After pondering for a long time, Han Shua vaguely came up with an idea, and that was to temporarily attach himself to a major power. Before his own strength was strong enough, he would make use of the power of others to keep the Shrine of Ice and Spider Goddess in check, as well as the Church of Light that he was about to offend. His 2 avatars cultivated in the elemental energy of death and the Edict of Destruction respectively. The body of his avatar of death was even condensed from a skeletal staff. No matter how he thought about it, Han Shua felt that it would be easier to communicate with the forces of the gods of death and destruction. Furthermore, the foundation of these 2 overgods on Profound Continent was the Calamity Church. After hearing Wolf's words, Han Shua was almost immediately certain that he wasn't the only one who had such an idea. It seemed that the 2 overgods' forces also had the same idea. They were likely using the Calamity Church to formally extend an olive branch to him. Han Shua put on a faint smile and said in a relaxed manner, "So that's how it is. Right, I agree to your request. However, you will have to wait for me for a period of time. When I am done with the matters here, I will immediately depart for the Calamity Church headquarters with you too." "Many thanks, your lordship." Wolf obviously heaved a sigh of relief after hearing Han Shua's agreement. Soon after, he said in a flattering manner, "Lord Brian, actually, when we first met, I already knew that we were on the same side. Hee, your lordship has just appeared, and you have already accomplished 2 major things. Many of the elders in the Calamity Church have been shaken. Now, You have even received a direct message from a god. Your lordship is indeed extraordinary. I hope that your lordship will guide us in the future. I hope that your lordship will guide us in the future. Bert Zeely, who had been silent all this while, also put on a flattering smile. Wolf and Bert Zeely had been helping Han Shuo with all their might since 5 years ago. They had invested enough capital on Han Shuo and helped Han Shuo annex the 7 Grand Duchies. Now that they saw Han Shuo's powerful return and that the Calamity Church had unprecedentedly attached importance to him, the two of them were more excited than anyone else. Han Shuo sized up the two with a smile and nodded. He patted Wolf's shoulder and said smilingly, "Smart people always have good luck. Don't worry, if there really is an opportunity in the future, I will not forget the help you have given me in the past." "Many thanks, your lordship. Many thanks, your lordship." Wolf and Bert Zeely were overjoyed and hastily expressed their gratitude to Han Shuo. Han Shuo had yet to officially join the Calamity Church, but all the higher-ups of the Calamity Church, including the Pope, were already shaken. The two of them knew that once Han Shuo officially joined the Calamity Church, with the skeletal staff in his hand, he would definitely have an enormous influence. With this guarantee from Han Shuo, the two of them seemed to have seen the scene of their meteoric rise in the future. Even though they were already old, they still couldn't calm down and became excited. "All right, the two of you can leave first. After I have settled the matters here, I will immediately head to the Calamity Church's headquarters with the two of you," Han Shuo instructed indifferently when he saw the two of them beaming with smiles. "Understood, your lordship. When your lordship has settled the matters here, you can contact us." Wolf respectfully saluted before leaving with Bert Zeely. Wolf had long ago told Han Shuo how to contact the Calamity Church. He had never treated Han Shuo as an outsider. Thinking about it, the Calamity Church's divine weapon, the skeletal staff, was in Han Shuo's hands. He was also a necromancer and a mortal enemy of the Church of Light. His actions for so many years were in line with the Calamity Church's principles. Naturally, the Calamity Church had long regarded him as one of their own. After Wolf and Bert Zeely left, Han Shuo pondered for a long time. He recalled the time when his soul was invaded under the cemetery of death. He understood that the god at that time only wanted Han Shuo's faith so that he would wholeheartedly serve the Calamity Church. However, now that Han Shuo himself was a god, Han Shuo believed that as long as those evil gods weren't fools, they wouldn't use that kind of method again. Different situations call for different actions. I can only make use of the Calamity Church. When my strength reaches a certain realm, it'll be hard to say who will be controlling who. Han Shuo thought to himself after a moment of silence. In the next few days, Han Shuo properly compensated the 3 ladies in Asen City, releasing the desires that they had painstakingly suppressed for the past 5 years. Han Shuo's performance in South Border City, as well as his deeds in Kasi Empire's Shrine of Ice, once again caused a sensation in Lancelot Empire after being deliberately disseminated by the Dark Mantle. It was as though Han Shuo had become the new object of faith for the people of Lancelot Empire overnight. Even the number of believers the Druidic Order had obtained after operating in Lancelot Empire for so many years couldn't compare to the number of believers Han Shuo had obtained in just a few days. Through Han Shuo's deliberate guidance, many citizens of Lancelot Empire truly believed in Han Shuo as a god, providing Han Shuo with a portion of the power of faith. Han Shuo was contentedly enjoying all this. However, there were still some matters that were more troublesome. For example, after he had made love with Emily that day, Emily mentioned Jasper and the others to Han Shuo. As a high-ranking member of the Dark Mantle, in addition to the fact that Jasper and the others had attracted too much attention when they appeared in the Valley of Sunshine, it would be strange if she didn't know about this matter. Han Shuo had no choice but to brace himself and explain to Emily. He especially emphasized the uniqueness of his demonic arts and the fact that he had no other choice. However, it was very obvious that Emily didn't believe Han Shuo's explanation at all. She said angrily, "Everyone in the Empire knows about your lust. How could it be as forced as you say? You can explain it to Fanny and Phoebe yourself. The two of them already know about it." Han Shuo couldn't help but smile wryly at Emily's words. He knew that Emily was easy to deal with, but Phoebe and Fanny were even more difficult to talk to. Also, what are you going to do with that Helen, the former Duke of Helen Duchy, and Sophie, the daughter of Sacred Knight Sulo? Emily continued, panting with rage. What does Sophie have to do with me? Han Shuo cried out that he was wrongly accused. Humph. She traveled thousands of miles from Kasi Empire to your Brett El City and made many contributions to your city. Now, she's specially raising warhorses in the former Bonton Duchy for Bretel City. Who doesn't know that she's interested in you? Emily sighed softly. She imitated Phoebe and pounded Han Shua's chest, saying bitterly, "Why are you so fickle?" Han Shua smiled wryly. He didn't know what to say, nor did he have anything to say. Chapter 611. In Asen City, Han Shuo had women on his left and right as he accompanied the three ladies, enjoying the joy of being together to his heart's content. Han Shuo had no choice but to brace himself and explain to the three ladies about Jasper, Selena, and Helen. Naturally, Phoebe and Fanny were furious at Han Shuo. However, under Han Shuo's coaxing and deceit, their anger gradually subsided. From the day they met Han Shuo, the three ladies knew that Han Shuo was not a good person. The grievances of his previous life had caused him to be lustful after his reincarnation. The three ladies clearly knew what kind of person Han Shuo was, yet they were still willing to be together with him. Therefore, they had to bear the consequences. What was done could not be undone. The three ladies accepted reality after their anger subsided. However, they repeatedly urged Han Shuo to know his place in the future. Han Shuo naturally agreed. Having successfully crossed the carnal realm, Han Shuo's lust was no longer as intense. This time, his guarantee came from the bottom of his heart. He felt that as long as he could control his state of mind, there shouldn't be any problems in the future. Staying in Asen City, Han Shuo accompanied the three ladies to have fun and at the same time put in effort to improve their strength. Under Han Shuo's guidance, Fanny gradually grasped the method of gathering the element of death with her body. With the help of the crystal condensed from the base god's body and Han Shuo's attentive guidance, Fanny made rapid progress. She had the opportunity to advance a step further and reach the realm of sacred Magus Necromancer at every moment. Emily was handed over by Han Shuo to be taught by Ermite Cotton. They both cultivated in the elemental energy of darkness, but Ermite Cotton was 2 realms higher than Emily. In addition, Emily's understanding of the element of darkness came from the notebook that Ermite Cotton had left behind. Therefore, it was very easy for Ermite Cotton to teach her, and her strength progressed very quickly. Ermite Cotton was very fond of Emily, truly treating her as his disciple. He imparted all of his understanding of dark magic to Emily, allowing Emily to improve by leaps and bounds. Just like Fanny, Phoebe was taught by Han Shuo. However, because Phoebe cultivated in fighting aura, Han Shuo could only give her some of his own cultivation insights and couldn't provide too much help in the details. Old Monster Statholm had more experience in this aspect. Unfortunately, Statholm had been training in Brett El City all this time and wouldn't be able to provide much help to Phoebe in the short term. When Han Shuo finished dealing with all the matters in Asen City and was preparing to leave for the Calamity Church with Wolf, Fanny excitedly returned from the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. She said to Han Shuo, "Dean Emma is going to retire. She said that she will pass the position of dean to me in a few days." "Really? Congratulations." Han Shuo laughed heartily, hugging Fanny and shaking her vigorously. "But I'm still too young. Will there be any problems?" Fanny was extremely excited, but she still appeared somewhat worried. "Don't worry, I'll take care of this matter. I'll definitely make sure you sit firmly on this position. Heh, it's about time for the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force to make some adjustments." I'll leave Asen City after I attend your inauguration ceremony," Han Shuo calmly said with a smile. The Babylon Academy of Magic and Force was full of talents. Grasping the authority of the Dean of the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force was equivalent to grasping the future of the Lancelot Empire. Many people would covet this position of Dean. However, Han Shuo believed that with his current influence in the Lancelot Empire, he would definitely be able to fulfill Fanny's wish. Will I not be able to do it well? Fanny also knew how much influence Han Shuo had in the Lancelot Empire. After hearing Han Shuo's guarantee, she knew that the position of Dean of the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force would definitely belong to her. However, she was still somewhat worried that she didn't have the ability to properly manage the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. How would you know if you haven't tried? Don't worry, I believe that you can do it. You should make some preparations first. Wait to take over the position of Dean in a few days. Han Shuo smiled as he consoled Fanny. After making his promise to Fanny, Han Shuo looked for King Lawrence and communicated with him. Lawrence was now practically obedient to Han Shuo's words and immediately agreed without thinking. He used the name of the imperial family to clear Fanny's name in advance and promised Han Shuo that he would go and support her when the time came. Behind Fanny was the king of the Southern Territory, Firenze, as well as the extraordinary existence Han Shuo. Lawrence obviously understood Fanny's value, and it was only natural that he would give her face. With Han Shuo's powerful influence in the Lancelot Empire, he communicated with Emma and a few other transcendental existences in the Empire, and the matter was immediately settled. No one dared to fight with Fanny for that position. While Han Shuo was making use of his influence, all the dignitaries of the Lancelot Empire expressed their goodwill and congratulations to Fanny. Many expensive gifts flooded towards Fanny like a tide, causing Fanny to be somewhat overwhelmed. The three ladies, Fanny, Emily, and Phoebe, each controlled an enormous amount of the Empire's resources. They also had the common Han Shuo behind them. In the Lancelot Empire, as long as one wasn't a lunatic, no one would dare to go against them. Everything had been properly prepared. 3 days later, a grand inauguration ceremony would be held in the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. Han Shuo arrived at the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force ahead of time. He reminisced about the past in the warehouse where he had stayed for a long time in the Necromancy Major. At the Nine Changes realm, Han Shuo could change his appearance and temperament at will. With just a simple transformation, Han Shuo was able to fool everyone. Here, Han Shuo still remembered some of the interesting things he had with Jack, the strange feelings he had built up with Little Skull, and the various incidents that had occurred with some students and odd job workers. After so many years, Han Shuo discovered that many of the sceneries here had undergone tremendous changes when he returned. The Necromancy Major, which was originally just a branch of the Dark Major, had long since established a school of its own. It had become a major whose students had surpassed the Dark Major. It had its own independent classroom and training ground and no longer used the resources of the Dark Major. The statues of famous people that stood on both sides of the wide avenue were still there. However, the tallest statue was a statue of himself. This statue had obviously changed. It was taller and more luxurious than all the other statues around it. There were only a few simple words on it: Brian, Guardian of the Empire, graduate of the Necromancy Major. Looking at the statue in front of him, a complicated feeling arose in Han Shuo's heart. He thought to himself that he probably didn't expect that he would become the greatest pride of the Babylon Academy in such a short period of time. It seemed like it was only yesterday that he and Jack had said that one day he would also become a statue and be placed here. Brian, is that you? Suddenly, a complicated soft cry came from behind him. The voice sounded a little shaky. Han Shuo's body trembled. He could tell that this familiar voice belonged to Lisa. He had already changed his appearance and his back was facing her. How could she recognize him so quickly? Han Shuo also felt a little sour in his heart. He didn't know if he should reveal his identity to her. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.